Momo threatens her teacher, claiming she will put an end to him no matter how much he resists. She smugly asks who the world would believe if she cried for help, warning that Class 1A is a living hell where teachers always quit. The exterior of the prestigious girls' high school stands tall under the clear sky. The school is described as a beautiful garden of girls. However, for male teachers, this place is a bed of thorns where naive dreams lead to painful lessons. A female colleague asks the new teacher if he is truly prepared to step through those doors. He simply replies that it is his duty as an educator. The sign for the staff room hangs quietly in the hallway. A young female teacher is shocked to hear that yet another new teacher has arrived. In the staff room, teachers discuss how the previous staff members quit one after another because of Class 1A. They ask Tenjiku Senjin if she heard about the eccentric person who agreed to take charge of such a problematic class. A teacher's ID badge lies on the desk as the gossip continues. The staff mockingly wonder if the new hire will even last a single week. One teacher confidently bets his lunch that the newcomer will resign within 7 days. As the others eagerly join the bet, Tenjiku Senjin tries to get their attention. The new teacher introduces himself as Jimmy Taro, looking remarkably plain. He stands quietly, holding his lesson materials. The startled colleagues ask how long he has been standing there, and he replies he was there the whole time. They comment on how his name literally sounds plain, which he calmly confirms. The staff offer insincere encouragement, pitying him for being a fresh graduate assigned to this nightmare. A colleague apologizes for the group's cynical attitude, explaining that the high turnover has left everyone jaded. She suddenly notices he is gone, and another teacher points out that he already left for the classroom. They find his eagerness foolish, whispering that the clueless substitute has no idea what awaits him. The whispers echo down the hallway, warning that his destination is the infamous Class 1A, often described as hell itself. They worry that he will fall victim to them the moment he steps through the door. Outside, the school building remains deceptively quiet, completely hiding the storm brewing within. Though it may seem like a garden of delicate flowers, this place is actually a bed of thorns. Zijin Senjin approaches the classroom, muttering to himself about entering this garden of girls. He stops right outside the door marked Class 1A. His eyes narrow behind his glasses as he prepares himself. He checks his watch, waiting for the precise moment to enter. The watch ticks steadily, marking the final seconds. He stands quietly in the hallway as the noisy chatter of the girls leaks through the door. Inside, the students gossip about the rumor of a new homeroom teacher arriving today, wondering how long this one will last. They laugh, agreeing that they probably do not even need to bother remembering his name. One girl dismisses the newcomer entirely, confident he will quit in no time anyway. Suddenly, a figure appears at the blackboard without making a sound. He introduces himself as Jimmy Taro, their new homeroom teacher, startling the students with his sudden presence. He politely explains he will be teaching math, while the girls whisper about how incredibly plain and unnoticeable he is. The students mock his name, but he calmly repeats that his name is indeed Jimmy Taro. They complain that he is the most boring and gloomy teacher they have ever had. He weakly asks the class to quiet down, but his voice is completely ignored. Suddenly, Momo steps in and loudly demands that everyone quiet down for the new teacher. She playfully lectures her classmates about raising their hands before speaking, just as their previous teacher taught them. She turns to him with a sweet mocking smile, calling him Jimmy-sensei. He acknowledges her wonderful attitude but prepares to correct her. He points out that his name is actually Jimmy, prompting a giggly apology from her. With a cheerful wave, she announces that she has a question for him. With a smug smile, she boldly asks him if he is still a virgin. At the front of the classroom, Zijin Senjin stands at his podium as the shocking question hangs in the air. Hearing this, some of the other female students look at each other and begin to whisper. Another student giggles and tries to stifle her laughter behind her hand. A girl blushes slightly, reacting to the bold question asked in class. The girls mockingly whisper that he clearly looks like an unpopular, uncool guy with zero romance experience. They confidently conclude that their teacher is definitely a virgin. To their surprise, the teacher calmly adjusts his glasses and confirms that they are correct. The classroom falls silent as the students process his blunt and honest response. A student looks on in disbelief at how easily he admitted it. The atmosphere remains tense and quiet after his unexpected declaration. He proudly declares that he is a lifelong virgin and a lifelong teacher. Momo stares at him in complete shock, completely caught off guard by his words. The students whisper among themselves, repeating his bizarre declaration in disbelief. They mock him, saying he only claims his job is his lover because nobody wants him. Ignoring the chatter, the teacher calmly asks if there are any other questions. He then calls out Momo by her full name and student number, startling her. She looks up in surprise, not expecting him to know who she is. Momo playfully praises him for memorizing her name so quickly, calling him excellent. She laughs it off, saying it is only natural that he knows her. She boasts about being super cute and famous, listing her age, measurements, and blood type. She is actually a highly popular high school model featured in a trendy magazine. With a disgusted look, Momo bluntly tells him that creepy teachers like him are physically impossible for her to stand. She then smugly slides a clipboard onto his desk. She sweetly tells him to sign it and quit being their homeroom teacher once he gets the message. But before he can even react, a trash bin labeled for burnable waste is suddenly dropped right onto his head. She mockingly calls him a plain teacher with a sweet smile. As the school bell chimes, she leans on his desk, looking up at him. Jimmy-sensei slides the staff room door open, covered in thick smoke and soot. Tenjiku-sensei turns around and gasps in absolute shock at his appearance. She frantically asks what on earth happened to make him so incredibly smoky. He calmly calmly explains he just taught a 45-minute math class, leaving her completely baffled. She gets angry at the students for ganging up on him, immediately blaming Momo as the ringleader. She sighs in deep frustration over how troublesome that girl truly is. Jimmy-sensei apologizes for the trouble while Tenjiku-sensei lets out a heavy sigh. He is labeled as the weak victim in this situation. She explains that Momo has been a spoiled child actress in show business, making her completely uncontrollable. She recalls how past teachers who tried to be firm were falsely accused of physical abuse by Momo. Momo would snap photos, threatening to sue the teachers for damaging her valuable body unless they resigned. Because of her celebrity status, the school was forced to fire teachers to avoid a public scandal. Other teachers simply ended up resigning after facing a relentless storm of one-sided harassment. Apologizing for the grim story, Tenjiku-sensei cheerfully invites him out for drinks to welcome him. Jimmy-sensei instantly and flatly declines her invitation. Tenjiku-sensei is stunned as he points out that drinking is not part of a teacher's job. He strictly defines a teacher's duty as educating and guiding students during school hours. Since his contract only covers teaching, Tenjiku-sensei is left feeling awkwardly rejected. He politely returns her handkerchief and excuses himself to prepare for his next class. She is left standing alone in the hallway, completely bewildered by his bluntness. Back in the classroom, Momo wonders if she even introduced herself to him that morning. To her surprise, Jimmy-sensei stands at the podium holding a physics textbook. He looks at her with his usual calm, unbothered expression. When she questions why a math teacher is teaching science, he reveals he holds multiple teaching licenses. She is left completely dumbfounded by his unexpected response. Standing calmly at the podium, Zijin Senshin announces that he will be taking charge of multiple subjects and teaching their class alone. She immediately objects to this, complaining that their grades will now depend entirely on his personal judgment. The classroom erupts into a wave of uneasy murmurs and tension at the sudden announcement. When another classmate protests that it is unfair, he flatly replies that he is simply doing his job, warning them that poor grades will lead to repeating the year. A heavy, anxious silence falls over the classroom as the students process the harsh reality of their new academic situation. Diwer Sanjin begins the class, instructing the students to open their textbooks to page 34. Suddenly, a carton of juice is violently squeezed, splashing liquid everywhere. The sticky juice drenches Diwer Sanjin completely, while Huajung stands behind him with an innocent smile. She quickly offers a sweet mock apology for the sudden mess. Smiling brightly, she playfully claims that her hand simply slipped. Diwer Sanjin dresses her calmly, prompting her to mockingly ask if she has actually made him angry. She continues to taunt him, daring him to hit her if he really wants to. She smugly reminds him that if a teacher resorts to corporal punishment, they will be fired immediately. Instead of losing his temper, he calmly accepts her excuse that her hand slipped. However, he points out that bringing food or drinks into class violates school rules, ordering her to report to the student guidance office after school. This unexpected discipline leaves her completely stunned and speechless. Nearby, her classmates begin whispering about how embarrassing it is to get called to guidance, wondering if she might actually repeat the year. As they laugh at how uncool that would be, she stands frozen in sheer disbelief. The classroom falls into an awkward dead silence around her. She can only grit her teeth in silent, burning frustration. Later, sitting alone on the stairs, she fumes over how infuriating he is. She wonders why he refused to take her bait, questioning if his emotions are dead or if he is just used to being treated coldly by women. Her train of thought is interrupted when her phone lights up with a message from her manager. She answers the call with a cheerful fake voice, asking about her upcoming variety show appearance. Her smile instantly vanishes when she is told that the job has been cancelled. She tries to play it cool, while her manager reassures her that she is super cute and another chance will come. She quietly agrees and hangs up, staring blankly at the screen. In a sudden fit of rage, she hurls her phone against the wall, shattering it. She mutters about how everything is the absolute worst, but resolves that high school must remain her perfect domain. Looking down at the broken device, she remains determined to keep this school as her ultimate playground. Meanwhile, Diwer Sanjin walks down the hallway toward the student guidance room, checking his watch. When he opens the door, he finds her waiting inside, teasingly calling him late. She mockingly adds that making a girl wait like this is exactly why he is a total virgin. He calmly notes that the time is exactly right, but then asks her why she is taking off her clothes. She teasingly offers to help him graduate from his virginity. She quickly admits that was a lie, explaining that since he won't quit despite her bullying, she will have to force him out. Undressing further, she asked what would happen if she screamed for help, claiming she was being attacked. She smugly asked Jinshi-sensei who the public would believe, a super cute high school model or a plain virgin teacher. Jimmy-sensei realized she was trying to fabricate an assault case to force him to resign, which she happily confirmed. He remarked that while falling for a student's provocation was the mark of a third-rate teacher, he could not overlook this. He sternly addressed her by her full name, Hananaka Momo, and her student number. Declaring that he would educate her, he began to aggressively tear off his own clothes. Momo stared in absolute shock, her eyes wide with disbelief. Terrified, she frantically asked if he was actually planning to attack her. A hand suddenly grabbed the sliding door of the classroom. She assumed his claim of being a lifelong virgin was just a pathetic excuse after all. Throwing the door open, Jimmy-sensei ran out and screamed at the top of his lungs for someone to help him. Momo was completely stunned as she realized he was screaming that he was the one being attacked. She stood frozen in disbelief at his unexpected counter strategy. As he continued to cry out, she chased after him, frantically telling him to stop joking and calling him crazy. He calmly looked back at her, questioning if that was really the case. Tenjiku-sensei rushed over, asking if something had happened to him. She and the other teachers gasped in horror at his disheveled state, screaming at him to cover his lower half. Momo tearfully lies to the onlookers, claiming that he attacked her because she is super cute and that she had to desperately resist him. Hearing this, Tenjiku-sensei calls out to him, but he calmly corrects her pronunciation of his name. However, she points out that he was the one screaming for help. And Akishi-sensei agrees that a female student would never attack a man, especially not someone like him. Amari-sensei then warns Jimmy-sensei that this situation will become a massive scandal that simple resignation cannot resolve. Jimmy-sensei calmly agrees with her assessment. He then points out that if he had actually assaulted her, it would indeed be a serious criminal matter. Because of that, he declares his intention to fully deny the charges and suggests they wait for the fingerprint analysis. He explains that since their school uniforms have zippers, his fingerprints would definitely be on her clothes if he had touched her, a point that Akashi-sensei finds logical. He adds that modern technology can easily extract prints from clothing, but since he never touched Momo, there is nothing to fear. He confidently asserts that they will not find a single fingerprint or even a fiber of his on her. Instead, he predicts that only Momo's fingerprints will be found on his own collar. He reveals that his shirt is made of a material specifically chosen to retain fingerprints easily, leaving Momo completely shocked. This revelation causes the surrounding students to whisper in disbelief, realizing that their popular model classmate actually attacked her plain teacher. Momo stands frozen, trembling in silent humiliation as the truth comes to light. Unable to contain her rage, she suddenly snaps and kicks Jimmy-sensei hard, screaming at him to cut it out. As the other teachers rush to restrain her, she furiously yells at him for acting so high and mighty. She demands to know if he is trying to make a fool out of her. Jimmy-sensei calmly replies that the previous teachers she forced to resign must have felt the exact same frustration she is feeling now. The violent kick leaves him sitting on the floor, bleeding from his nose. Tenjiku-sensei gasps in worry at the sight of his blood, but he insists that he is perfectly fine. He stoically states that enduring such things is simply part of being a teacher. Meanwhile, Tenjiku-sensei and Akashi-sensei angrily scold Momo, warning her that suspension will not be enough to cover this violent outburst. Amari-sensei adds that if they do not handle this quietly, Momo could end up with a criminal record for assault. The word arrest leaves Momo completely stunned, while her classmates whisper in disbelief that their cute idol could face such a fate. Another classmate mutters in shock, unable to accept the reality of the situation. Her friends look on helplessly, wondering what they can possibly do to save her from this disaster. She looks up at him, calling out in a quiet, hesitant voice. Desperate to avoid the consequences of her actions, she begs him for forgiveness, promising to do anything and be a good girl. She points out that the school would also suffer if the police got involved, while he remains completely silent. He finally speaks, adjusting his glasses and asking if she truly means she will do absolutely anything. Since she agreed, he tells her there is only one simple thing she must do from now on. Jimmy-sensei smiles gently and tells her to simply live a wonderful school life with a beautiful heart, like a flower in a garden. The other teachers stand in absolute shock at his incredibly lenient response. They cannot believe that is all he is asking, wondering why there is no punishment whatsoever. One of them points out that he could have easily retaliated after everything Momo did to him. Jimmy-sensei calmly explains that he has no desire for revenge. He explains that it is enough that she realized her actions were wrong, and that he could guide her back to the right path. For him, that successful guidance is all that matters. He offers a warm, genuine smile, reminding her that he is, after all, a teacher. Momo stares at him in disbelief, deeply moved by his unexpected kindness. She is amazed to see him smile, realizing that despite his plain appearance, he suddenly looks incredibly bright to her. Feeling frustrated by her own tears, she begins to cry as Tenjiku-sensei watches on. She admits to herself that her work in the entertainment industry has been painful, and that she has wanted to quit, overwhelmed by his gentle treatment. Breaking down in tears, Momo confesses how stressful her modeling career has been and how her frustration led her to lash out. She bows deeply and apologizes for taking her anger out on him, leaving the other teachers watching in sympathy. Tenjiku-sensei gently comforts her, assuring her that understanding her mistake is all that matters as Momo continues to apologize. As the school day ends, he flatly announces that his shift is over and prepares to leave. Meanwhile, the school bell begins to chime loudly throughout the hallway. Seeing him walk away, Akashi-sensei and Tenjiku-sensei desperately call out for him to wait, reminding him of his responsibility. Tenjiku-sensei points out that he was speaking so much like a proper teacher earlier, pleading with him to at least listen to her story. Hearing this, Jimmy-sensei stops and turns back to ask what story they are referring to. He then coldly questions whether dealing with such matters is actually a teacher's job. As the other teachers watch in shock, Jimmy-sensei asks if all this talk about the entertainment industry and quitting is just from watching too much drama, pointing out it has nothing to do with school life. He continues by stating that while working within school-approved limits is fine, they must stop bringing problems and responsibilities beyond his scope to him. To make his stance clear, he adds that it is outside his contract, and he cannot act as her parent or manager. With a serious expression, Jimmy-sensei proudly declares that he is a lifelong virgin and a lifelong teacher. After that, he bids farewell to Hananaka, Momo, and the other teachers, addressing each of them by name as he walks away. Behind him, Akashi-sensei is amazed he is actually leaving. Amari-sensei calls him heartless, and Tenjiku-sensei is left completely stunned by his virginity confession. Meanwhile, Momo quietly wipes away her tears in silence. Looking down, she whispers his full name, Jimmy Taro, sorrow to herself. As Jimmy-sensei walks down the hallway, a female student calls him the absolute worst and mocks his virginity. However, another student wonders how the new teacher already knew all of their names when they had not even introduced themselves yet. They discuss rumors that he holds multiple high school teaching licenses and must be well over 30, despite looking much younger. Meanwhile, a student peeks into the empty classroom. The classroom remains completely quiet and deserted. Back in the classroom, a female student mockingly mimics Momo, complaining about how hard the entertainment industry is. A male student joins in, calling her incredibly shameless for changing her attitude so quickly after failing. Another girl remarks that a fool whose only redeeming quality is her looks is completely useless. When one of them mockingly warns that Momo might not come to school tomorrow, another replies that would actually be perfect. On the blackboard, cruel graffiti mocking both Momo and Jimmy-sensei has been written. The students stand before the board, declaring that they want both Momo and the virgin teacher gone from their sight. The graffiti mockingly welcomes Jimmy-sensei to the hell of Class 1A. In the staff room, teachers whispered about the shocking rumor that the popular student Hananaka Momo had attacked Jimmy-sensei only to be completely defeated. They found it hard to believe that such a plain, unassuming teacher could have handled her. Suddenly, the staff room door was flung open with a loud bang, interrupting the gossip. Tenjiku-sensei burst in, frantically calling out to Jimmy-sensei that there was a major emergency. She urgently demanded that he come to Class 1 immediately, where cruel graffiti about his virginity had been written on the blackboard. As they walked up the stairs, Tenjiku-sensei explained that Class 1A was home to 5 boss problem children. Jimmy-sensei calmly asked her if she knew why these particular troublemakers were so difficult to deal with. When she guessed it was due to donations and connections, he clarified that they were not just ordinary problem children. He noted that some of these girls were highly influential and considered part of the chosen elite. On campus, other students watched them with awe and admiration as they walked by. Among them was Yab Tsubaki, the brilliant top student of the class and daughter of a prominent politician. Beside her stood Tante Ili Xiang, the wealthy heiress of a major conglomerate who matched her in academic excellence. Then there was Asai Jusha, the athletic star of the volleyball team who was admired like a prince by the girls. Finally, there was Xiaotian Jinji, a popular social media figure and genius teenage artist already scouted by publishers. Alongside them, Tante Billy Xiang and Yatsubaki stand together, looking incredibly elegant and refined. Seeing them, their classmates admire how wonderful everyone is, noting that Class 1A is packed with amazing students. Other girls swoon, feeling as though they've entered a completely different, sparkling world. However, one student points out that the most incredible person of all has to be none other than Hananaka Momo, who stands alone in the classroom. But as she looks at the blackboard, she gasps in utter shock. She lets out a horrified scream at the cruel graffiti written about her. Clutching her head, Momo shrieks in outrage over what they have done to her cute image. She spins around, desperately demanding to know who is responsible for this. A classmate nervously explains that it was already there when she arrived, leaving Momo in stunned silence. She turns back to face the blackboard, staring at the harsh words. Touching the chalk, Momo recognizes the handwriting and realizes a terrible possibility. Suddenly, Momo is roughly bumped aside and gasps in pain. Someone coldly brushes past her without a word of apology. It is Tsubaki who coldly tells her to move out of the way. Standing with Erika, Nagisa, and Maki, Tsubaki bluntly tells Momo that she is just in the way. Maki and her friend casually chat about their upcoming math class, completely ignoring Momo's presence. Unable to stay silent, Momo quietly calls out to them. She loudly demands they stop, accusing Tsubaki and the others of drawing the graffiti, only for Tsubaki to coldly dismiss her. Momo stands frozen as her former friends stare back at her with icy indifference. Trembling with anger, Momo demands to know what they are trying to accomplish by doing this. With tears welling in her eyes, Momo looks at Tsubaki. She then turns her gaze to Erika, searching for any sign of warmth. She looks at Nagisa, hoping for some explanation. She looks at Maki but finds only cold stares. Finally breaking down, Momo cries out, asking if they weren't all supposed to be her friends. Hearing her cry, Tsubaki merely looks back at her and quietly murmurs her name. She coldly tells Huarjung that nobody ever considered her a friend, calling her an idiot with a cruel smirk. Left completely stunned, Huarjung speechless at the sudden betrayal. Meanwhile, the classroom atmosphere grows increasingly hostile as the other girls watch. Hananaka tries to protest, but Tsubaki loudly announces to the class that she is a traitor who fawned over their virgin teacher, which Maki immediately chimes in to confirm. Maki then gleefully details how she saw Hananaka crying and clinging to the teacher while dressed only in her underwear. Hearing this, the surrounding classmates whisper in disgust, realizing that the scandalous rumors about Hananaka were actually true. They mock her terrible taste for throwing herself at a virgin teacher, expressing their utter disappointment in her. Following their harsh words, Erika and Tsubaki coldly turn their backs on Momo, telling her to never speak to them again. Suddenly, Tenjiku-sensei bursts into the room, shouting at the students to stop. However, Jimi Taro calmly points out that first period is about to begin, prompting Tenjiku-sensei to angrily tell him to get out of the way. Tenjiku-sensei watches in frustration as he quietly leaves the room. She is left standing alone in the hallway, trying to process the bizarre interaction. Confused and exasperated, she wonders if she was somehow the one in the wrong. Meanwhile, another teacher walks past her, leaving her even more bewildered. Back inside the classroom, Momo sits in stunned silence at her desk, completely isolated. Looking down at her desk, she finds cruel graffiti scrawled all over it. She begins to tear up, unable to comprehend why someone as cute as her has to suffer such humiliation. Clenching her fists, her sadness quickly turns into intense anger. She furiously blames the virgin teacher for ruining her life and causing all of this. In a fit of rage, she sweeps her vandalized notebook off her desk. Later, Jimmy Taro finds Momo out in the hallway and calls out to her. Out of breath and visibly distressed, she turns to face him. As he looks at her, she screams that everything in her life has been completely ruined because of him. She then shoves her smartphone in his face, telling him to look at what someone has posted online. Momo reveals with horror that an online article has branded her as a predator who assaulted her own teacher. She laments that because of this trouble, her manager scolded her, and her modeling jobs were cancelled. Feeling completely miserable, she mutters to herself about how awful everything has become. She stands alone in the hallway, silently wishing she could just quit this school altogether. Suddenly, Jimmy-sensei approaches her from behind and calls out her name. He looks at her with concern and asks if she is doing all right. Startled by his sudden kindness, Hananaka stammers in confusion, but Jimmy-sensei calmly explains that caring for a student in distress is simply his duty as a teacher. He reiterates that it is only natural for him to worry when a student is struggling with school life. He reassures her that he will immediately handle the paperwork to reorder her textbooks, leaving her momentarily speechless. Though still annoyed by him, Hananaka begrudgingly admits to herself that he actually has a kind side as an educator. As Jimmy-sensei turns to leave, Hananaka quickly stops him to demand answers about her career. She furiously demands to know what will happen to her modeling career and insists that he take responsibility for it. Jimmy-sensei looks back at her with a completely blank, unimpressed expression. He bluntly questions if managing her professional modeling career is supposed to be a teacher's job. He reminds her that he has no involvement in her outside work, recalling his warning from the previous day about bringing non-school issues to him. He clarifies that his only duty is to ensure she can enjoy a comfortable and proper school life. He firmly states that his responsibility begins and ends with her education. He then walks away, warning her that her next class is physics and that being late will negatively impact her internal grades. Hananaka stands frozen in shock at his cold, uncompromising attitude. Furious, she throws a tantrum and screams that she will never quit school until she successfully forces him to resign first. Jimmy-sensei calmly replies that he is glad to hear she has found a reason to stay in school. From a distance, two female classmates watch the exchange with deep suspicion. They whisper to each other, expressing disappointment that a professional model like Momo seems so invested in a plain teacher. They gossip about how she could have her pick of handsome men in the entertainment industry, yet she is wasting her time on a virgin teacher. They assume that she must be completely isolated in class with no one else left to turn to. The classmates sneer, concluding that Momo has truly fallen from grace. Nearby, Tsubaki stands silently in the hallway, listening to their cruel gossip with a cold expression. Walking away, she recalls that a similar incident occurred once before. Back then, classmates had gathered, trying to remember the student from Class 1A who had caused trouble for their previous teacher. They had whispered among themselves, struggling to recall the girl's name. They wondered where that notorious girl could possibly be at this very moment. Inside the nurse's office, a smartphone lay on the bed displaying a scandalous news article about a popular high school model. Suddenly, Tsubaki entered the room with a cold smile, asking if they could talk as the dark memories of Class 1 resurfaced. A pair of sharp, intense eyes stared back in response to the sudden intrusion. Standing before the messy bed, Tsubaki firmly demanded a private word with her classmate. As they walk down the hallway, a classmate asks Tsubaki why she visited the nurse's office. Tsubaki explains that's where the school dropouts go, prompting another girl to recall such a person. Although they struggle to remember her name, one of them points out that speaking of her that way is rather rude. With a knowing smile, Tsubaki offers to tell them a story about a certain newly appointed teacher. She narrates that the enthusiastic new teacher was immediately confronted by two highly problematic students. One of them was a selfish troublemaker whose only redeeming quality was her cute appearance. The other was a shy, reclusive girl who only attended school by staying in the nurse's office. While the selfish girl bullied the teacher daily, the reclusive student constantly offered him encouragement. The nurse's office student comforted him by sharing her own pain, and the two grew incredibly close. However, their peaceful bond was suddenly shattered when a terrible incident occurred. A dark shadow fell over their lives as things took a turn for the worse. Due to the selfish student's cruel schemes, the teacher was forced to resign, leaving the reclusive girl harboring deep resentment. She sat alone in the nurse's office, consumed by bitterness over the loss of her only ally. The story concludes with the bitter realization that the selfish troublemaker was the one who should have disappeared. Meanwhile, Momo Hananaka opens her locker only to find her shoes vandalized with cruel insults. She complains about her belongings constantly being targeted, stubbornly insisting that she is far too cute to be called ugly. Suddenly, she spots Jimmy-sensei walking down the hallway and calls out to him. The teacher stops and calmly acknowledges her. She rushes over to him to report the ongoing harassment. Although he notes that homeroom is starting, she frantically explains that her indoor shoes have also been targeted. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by a loud echoing crash coming from the stairwell. They look over to find a female student lying motionless at the bottom of the stairs. Tenjiku-sensei clutches her head in absolute shock at the sight. She panics loudly, but Ji-sensei remains completely unfazed and tells her to quiet down. The fallen student weakly apologizes for slipping, and the teacher confirms that she is still conscious. He decides to call an ambulance as a precaution, leaving Tenjiku-sensei astonished by his cold, logical composure. Looking closely at the injured girl, Jimmy-sensei quietly identifies identifies her as student number 30. He recognizes her as Banri-san, a student from his own class 1A. Soon after, an ambulance arrives at the school to transport her. He decides to accompany her to the hospital, asking Tenjiku-sensei to handle things in his absence, which leaves her startled. Jimmy-sensei walks away to board the ambulance as Tenjiku-sensei watches him go. Tenjiku-sensei watches him leave, quietly murmuring his name in deep thought. Tenjiku-sensei is surprised that Jimmy-sensei knew about Mari, but he calmly questions why that is unusual. She explains that Mari is a student who has been attending school solely through the nurse's office. Mari recalls spending almost all her time in the nurse's office since starting high school, to the point where classmates do not even know her name. Tenjiku-sensei finds it amazing that Jimmy-sensei remembered her despite having just arrived, but he states it is only natural. Jimmy-sensei simply states that remembering his students is his duty because he is a teacher. Tenjiku-sensei watches the ambulance drive away with a thoughtful expression. Erika Tsutsuji watches from a distance, realizing for the first time that such a girl was in her class. Erika stands in the hallway, looking down in deep thought. She worries about having missed the chance to return the girl's indoor shoes. At the hospital, Jimmy-sensei sighs and considers borrowing some slippers. He approaches Mari as she sits quietly in the waiting room. He gently asks her if she is feeling all right. He reassures her that apart from a sprained left ankle, she has no other injuries. Mari looks down and softly calls out to him. Suddenly, she throws her arms around his neck in a tight embrace. She tearfully thanks him while holding on to him tightly. She explains how her week will kept her isolated, with others barely acknowledging her existence. Jimmy-sensei stands completely still, surprised by her sudden embrace. She confesses with a gentle smile that having someone call her by her name after so long made her incredibly happy. Mari reaches out and gently touches his arm, calling his name. She looks up at him and asks if he promises not to quit or abandon her. Jimmy-sensei looks at her with a serious, quiet expression. With a bright, hopeful smile, she asks if she can truly believe in him. Meanwhile, back at school, Hananaka-san is also desperately hoping that she won't be abandoned in her own time of need. Outside, the school day continues as usual, completely oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding. But inside the classroom, she screams in horror upon finding her desk covered in hateful graffiti telling her to die. She desperately tried to scrub the harsh words away, but the ink refused to budge. Meanwhile, her classmates gathered in the shadows, whispering and snickering at her misery. Momo muttered in frustration that the graffiti wouldn't fade, stubbornly insisting to herself that she wasn't actually ugly. Her nightmare only worsened when she discovered her lunchbox had been thrown into the trash can. To make matters worse, she realized her textbooks, notebooks, and dictionary had also been completely ruined. During class, the teacher, Amari, noticed her lack of materials and asked if she had forgotten her English supplies. When Momo tried to explain it wasn't her fault, Amari cut her off, warning her that she couldn't get by on looks alone. Infuriated, Momo snapped and called Amari an old hag, shouting that she was innocent. The insult left Amari standing completely frozen in shock. Fuming, Momo stomped down the hallway, complaining that nobody would ever listen to her side of the story. She arrived at her locker, hungry and miserable, lamenting how everything was the absolute worst. But as she opened her locker door, her complaints died in her throat. She gasped in horror to find her gym uniform slashed and ruined inside. Furious, Momo demanded to know who was responsible for this and told them to stop messing around. She boasted that they wouldn't get away with treating someone as cute as her this way. Suddenly, a classmate approached from behind and poured a sticky drink directly over her head. The bullies mockingly apologized, giggling and claiming their hands had simply slipped. They sneered at her, mockingly wondering what she would do now since she had no change of clothes. They laughed and suggested she go cry to their virgin teacher, joking that he wasn't some magical savior. With that, they walked away giggling, leaving her alone in her misery. Momo stood frozen, unable to believe the cruelty she was experiencing. She stared blankly at the empty soda can rolling on the wet floor. A memory of Jimmy-sensei flashed through her mind, reminding her of the only person who had shown her any kindness. She quietly wondered if people normally went this far with their torment. As she stood there, Momo began to reflect, realizing this was exactly the kind of torment she had inflicted on her previous teachers. She looked down at her soaked, ruined clothes in shame. She sighed heavily, admitting to herself that experiencing this firsthand was incredibly painful. Meanwhile, Jimmy-sensei walked down the hallway nearby, completely unaware of her plight as other students laughed in the background. Snapping out of her despair, Hananaka-san angrily yells at her mockers that she isn't ugly and is actually super cute. But as she fumes in frustration, she suddenly loses her footing. She gasps in surprise as she begins to fall backward. Nearby, Akashi and another male teacher are casually chatting about an upcoming test, completely unaware. Before they can react, Momo crashes directly onto Jimmy-sensei, landing on top of him on the hallway floor. The two teachers watch the embarrassing scene unfold in complete stunned silence. Momo blinks in confusion, slowly realizing the compromising position they are in. Seeing them like this, the shocked colleague asks if the rumors about Momo are actually true, prompting her to frantically deny it. She desperately explains that this is not what it looks like, claiming it was just an act of harassment against him. She loudly declares that she utterly despises this virgin teacher and wishes he would just resign, while Jimmy-sensei remains completely silent. After getting up, Momo stands there, panting heavily while Jimmy-sensei remains seated on the floor. She points an angry finger at him, venting her frustration. When Jimmy-sensei calls her name, Momo snaps back, blaming him for standing there and telling him to get lost. Jimmy-sensei calmly responds to her outburst. He then holds out a gym uniform, offering it to her so she can change. Jimmy-sensei explains that he brought her replacement indoor shoes and also prepared new notebooks and writing utensils to replace her discarded ones. He advises her on how to clean the graffiti off her desk and hands her some bread since she missed lunch, leading Momo to compare him to Doraemon. When she softly asks why he is doing all this, he simply replies that it is because he is her teacher. He looks at her warmly and promises that as long as she is his student, he will always be there to support her. Moved by his kindness, looks down, tears begin to well up in her eyes. Meanwhile, a dark-haired girl named Mari watches them from a distance down the hallway. Mari quietly calls out to Jimmy-sensei, bringing up their conversation from earlier that morning. Her eyes take on a dark, intense, and deeply unsettling expression. She ominously reveals that there is actually a continuation to what they had discussed. She refers to a rumor among the students that a former teacher had to be hospitalized in a psychiatric ward after a complete mental breakdown. While others mock his weak mentality and laugh at how easily he broke, one student quietly notes that everyone has different limits. However, the dark-haired girl corrects them, hinting that the true source of his ruin wasn't the problematic students at all. Meanwhile, Hananaka Momo desperately begs Jimmy-sensei to help her as he stands beside her. Suddenly, Mari stands before Jimmy-sensei, covered in blood and holding a knife, pleading with him not to abandon her. A sudden scream echoes through the school hallway as onlookers react in absolute horror. Without warning, Mari has suddenly sliced her own wrist, standing with a chilling, vacant smile. Shocked by the gruesome sight, Momo demands to know what she is doing, while Jimmy-sensei watches in silent gravity. As Jimmy-sensei walked past her in the hallway, Momo watched him with a look of deep concern. The surrounding students panic in total confusion as the chaotic scene unfolds before them. Someone desperately shouts a warning to Jimmy-sensei as blood splatters across the floor. The scene transitions to the school infirmary. Inside, Momo angrily demands to know why Tenjiku-sensei is the one who collapsed, forcing the teacher to offer a weak apology. Momo searches the quiet room for first aid supplies to help. Tenjiku-sensei admits she fainted because she cannot handle blood or horror movies, prompting Momo to make a sharp remark while searching for supplies. Despite the harsh words, Tenjiku-sensei softly observes that Momo is actually a very kind person. Momo immediately gets defensive, asking if that was sarcasm, but the teacher assures her there was no ill intent. She insists she is not kind at all, reminding the teacher of how she used to boycott her classes and even threw erasers at her. Tenjiku-sensei acknowledges those past misdeeds but gently tries to offer another perspective. Momo then confesses that she was honestly happy when Tenjiku-sensei stood up for her when cruel insults were written on the blackboard. Tenjiku-sensei is left wide-eyed and deeply moved by Momo's unexpected honesty. Meanwhile, resting in a hospital bed, Mari reflects on how she was too busy hurting others to realize that everyone sometimes just wants someone to be kind to them. She remembers how her classmates used to whisper about her, completely ignoring her presence because she was so quiet. Even her own mother had coldly told her not to be a burden just because she could not fit in at school. But then, Jimmy-sensei had sat by her side, offering her a rare moment of genuine warmth. This simple act of kindness brought a bright, heartfelt smile to her face. She fondly remembered a warm, peaceful moment when she and Jimmy-sensei smiled happily together. But that beautiful memory slipped away as a hand reached out desperately to hold onto it. Back in the present, Mari weakly calls out for her teacher from her hospital bed. Meanwhile, the school hallways remained completely silent and empty. Back at school, the grade dean confronts him, demanding to know if it is true that he recklessly charged at a student armed with a box cutter. He remains completely calm at his desk, ignoring the dramatic scolding looming over him. The dean continues to lecture him, shouting about what could have happened and how she would have been held responsible as his superior. When she expresses relief that Akashi-sensei and another colleague were there to help, they sheepishly admit they were completely useless. Another colleague speaks up, admitting he was terrified Jimmy-sensei would get stabbed and expressing shock at how quickly he disarmed Mari. The colleague asks if he considered the danger of her swinging the blade or committing suicide, noting that she is a notorious troublemaker. Jimmy-sensei listens quietly, his expression unreadable behind his glasses. The colleague shares a dark rumor about how Mari once cornered her previous teacher at his home, slashing her wrists while screaming threats. As the other teachers recall how that incident drove the former teacher to a nervous breakdown, Jimmy-sensei coldly asserts that Mari has no actual intention of dying. He explains that her actions are merely a bluff, adding that her fall down the stairs earlier that morning was likely staged as well. While his colleagues are appalled by his harsh judgment of his own student, Jimmy-sensei insists that the truth is obvious to anyone who looks. He declares with absolute confidence that he knows this simply because he is a teacher. With his shift officially over, Jimmy-sensei politely announces his departure and prepares to leave. His colleagues try to call him back to finish their conversation, but he walks out anyway, stating that his working hours have concluded. The remaining teachers watch him leave, peering through the doorway with mixed expressions of frustration and concern. They begin to discuss whether it was truly the right decision to have Mari hospitalized. They worry about the implications of putting a student in a medical facility. Inside the hospital, staff members note that they had no choice since her guardian requested it, and it is only a short-term stay to help her calm down. A nurse walks down the quiet hallway, carrying a clipboard as she checks on the rooms. The staff express hope that no more trouble arises, unaware that someone is calling out from inside a room. The nurse opens the door to Mari's room, only to find the hospital bed completely empty with the sheets disheveled. Outside, a pair of bare feet steps onto the cold ground, indicating that Mari has escaped. Mari walks down the dark city streets alone, her long hair flowing behind her as she moves past distant couples. She wanders aimlessly through the night, completely barefoot and still dressed in her hospital clothes. With a vacant, intense tense look in her eyes, she softly whispers for her teacher. She disappears into the quiet neighborhood, driven by her deep obsession. Meanwhile, panicked footsteps echo loudly through the school building as someone runs in a desperate hurry. The runner rushes through the school entrance doors. They sprint down the empty hallway toward the staff room. Tenjiku-sensei bursts through the door in a panic, shouting that something terrible has happened and asking for Jimmy-sensei. Akashi-sensei informs her that Jimmy-sensei hasn't arrived yet, noting that he doesn't advise any clubs and always arrives exactly on time at 8:30. Leaving Tenjiku-sensei to lament how incredibly rigid his schedule is. She frantically explains that they have a major emergency on their hands. While Momo listens in from the hallway, completely bewildered. Momo peeks through the door, trying to understand what is going on. Tenjiku-sensei reveals that Mari apparently escaped from the hospital the previous night, leaving Momo utterly shocked. She continues explaining that for some inexplicable reason, Mari has now appeared somewhere unexpected. High up on the school roof, a lone figure stands dangerously close to the edge. It is Mari looking down with a blank, hollow expression. Tenjiku-sensei gasps that Mari is on the school roof, prompting another teacher to worry if she plans to jump. While Akashi-sensei angrily curses Jimmy-sensei for claiming he had no intention of dying, Mari stands silently on the roof looking out over the school grounds. Below, teachers and students gather in panic, looking up at her. Tenjiku-sensei screams for Mari to come down because it is dangerous, but as she and Momo burst onto the roof, Mari simply wonders why they are there. She looks back at them, demanding to know why Jimmy-sensei isn't the one who came for her. Mari tearfully reminds them that Jimmy-sensei promised he would never abandon her. She explains that she spent the entire night searching for him, wishing she knew where he lived so she didn't have to wander the streets in vain. When she laments that he wasn't even at school, Momo gently points out that he always goes home strictly on time. Momo slowly approaches Mari, trying to keep her calm. She softly admits that while she doesn't know Mari very well, she is willing to listen if Mari has something weighing heavily on her mind. Momo adds that she is currently free from work and feels she can understand Mari's pain, but Mari furiously snaps back, telling Momo not to lump them together. Mari angrily accuses Momo of being pampered and living selfishly, telling her not to pretend to understand just because she experienced a little isolation. She coldly reminds Momo that she was the one who forced their previous teacher, Suzuki-sensei, to resign. Crying hysterically, Mari screams that Jimmy-sensei was the only person she had left in her life. Momo tearfully offers a sincere apology, her face flushed with regret. Tsubaki Yabu looks on in complete shock, her eyes wide with disbelief. Meanwhile, Tenjiku-sensei watches the emotional exchange from a short distance away. Momo admits she has recently realized how terribly she has treated others in the past. She confesses she used to think teachers were just annoying, barely remembering their names. But she acknowledges that the other girl remembered and held on to those memories. She concludes that Jimmy-sensei must have been an incredibly supportive teacher for Banri-san. However, Momo bluntly calls Banri-san's extreme attention-seeking methods incredibly annoying. Banri-san stares back in utter shock, completely stunned by the harsh words. Momo points out that cutting wrists or threatening to jump is just harassment. She claims this behavior is why Banri-san has no friends, provoking an angry outburst. Banri-san accuses Momo of actively blocking her from getting close to Jimmy-sensei. They trade insults, with Momo boasting about her looks while Banri-san calls her stupid. Tenjiku-sensei tries to intervene and calm down the two arguing girls. Banri-san seethes with rage, completely pushed to her absolute limit. Suddenly, Banri-san loses her footing and slips backward over the balcony railing. Momo gasps in horror as she witnesses the sudden and terrifying accident. Banri-san falls backward into the empty air, completely helpless. Momo screams out Banri-san's name in sheer panic as she falls. She desperately reaches her hand out over the railing, trying to grab her, but her fingers grasp only empty air as Banri-san plummets downward. Suddenly, Jimmy-sensei lunges over the rooftop railing in a desperate attempt to save the falling student. Momo watches in absolute shock as he leaps after Mari. She reaches out in terror, unable to stop the terrifying plunge. Momo gasps in disbelief as the two plunge into the thick trees below. She stares down, completely frozen by the terrifying sight. Momo remains paralyzed with fear, unable to process what just happened. Onlookers scream in sheer panic at the horrifying fall. Miraculously, Jimmy-sensei manages to catch Mari and cushion their fall in the branches. Holding her close, Jimmy-sensei remarks that it was a close call while onlookers yell in relief. The crowd cries out that they thought he died, calling their survival a miracle. Amari-sensei begs him not to overdo it, and Jimmy-sensei promises to visit the hospital later. Once on the ground, Jimmy-sensei gently asks Mari if she is injured. Mari begins to confess her true feelings, but Jimmy-sensei reveals he already knew she did not want to die. He looks at her with a calm, knowing expression as she listens in surprise. He points out that Mari is right-handed, yet she chose to make shallow cuts on her left arm. He explains that while those cuts bleed heavily, they are far from fatal. If she truly intended to end her life, she would have used her dominant hand to cut deeply. He asks if she honestly believed no one was watching her. With a warm smile, Jimmy-sensei assures her that he is always watching because he is her teacher. He promises he will never quit or abandon her as long as he remains a teacher. Gently, he tells her there is no longer any need to hurt herself just to get someone's attention. Hearing this, Mari looks down with a somber and conflicted expression. She then looks up with a tearful, joyful smile and happily agrees to his terms. However, he firmly reminds her that any time outside of his working hours is his private time, which she must respect. He then added that she must wear her school uniform properly when coming to school. As he walked away, he called back to warn her not to be late for class. Watching him leave, Mari pondered his his words about private time, while Tenjiku-sensei recalled how he had rushed to the rooftop and jumped off without hesitation. She thought about how it was a miracle he survived, since a single mistake could have been fatal, yet he showed no hesitation at all. She stared at his retreating back, deeply affected by his reckless bravery. With a serious expression, Tenjiku-sensei quietly repeated his full name, Jimmy Taro. Hananaka Momo stood under the running shower, completely lost in her own thoughts. She closed her eyes as the warm water washed over her face. She remembered the terrifying moment when Jimmy-sensei leaped off the school roof. In that critical instant, she had been completely frozen and unable to move a single step. She felt deeply humiliated that such a dorky, virgin teacher had briefly looked cool to her. She squeezed her eyes shut in frustration, unable to accept her own reaction. She slammed her fist against the shower wall to vent her anger. Her frustrated scream echoed from her apartment building into the night sky. The next morning, the school building stood quiet under a bright sky. Inside the classroom, Jimmy-sensei began writing math equations on the blackboard. The students sat at their desks, holding their textbooks and paying attention. Jimmy-sensei called out to Banri-san to address her during the lesson. She responded with a bright, cheerful smile, happy to be noticed by him. From the hallway, other teachers watched in amazement that she had finally left the nurse's office. The faculty members gathered in the staff room to discuss the recent events. Akashi expressed surprise at her return, while another teacher pointed out Hananaka Momo's situation. He noted that Hananaka Momo was still being heavily criticized on social media. Despite her poor grades and constant sleepiness, she continued to attend school every single day. They agreed that most students in her position would have broken down or quit entirely. Hananaka Momo grumbled to herself, determined not to quit until she saw Jimmy-sensei resign first. Meanwhile, Banri-san stared intensely at the teacher, her mind filled with an obsessive chant of his name. Tenjiku-sensei praised the two girls' hard work, wondering if Jimmy-sensei's influence was the reason. She murmured to herself that there was something truly unusual about him. Just then, Akashi opened the door and noticed him arriving. The male torturer mentioned they were just talking about him, while another colleagues praised him for reforming the troublemakers of Class 1A. They admitted they initially thought he was plain and unreliable, but now they completely respected Jimmy-sensei. Tenjiku-sensei informed them that Jimmy-sensei had already left because his shift was over. The other teachers were left completely dumbfounded by his sudden departure. Jimmy-sensei was already gone, leaving only the quiet school corridor behind. He walked calmly down the empty hallway toward the exit. Suddenly, Tsubaki Yabu and the other girls from Class 1A appeared on the stairs to congratulate him. Jimmy-sensei stopped and stared at them with his usual expressionless face. Tsubaki Yabu brought up how he had jumped off the roof to save Marisan, becoming a hero. She smiled, noting that unlike previous teachers, he seemed willing to face them without running away. She pointed out how surprising it was that Mari-san, who never left the nurse's office, would do something so bold. She remarked on how difficult it must have been for Jimmy-sensei to deal with such a dramatic situation. Jimmy-sensei calmly observed that she seemed very well informed. Addressing her as student number 37, Tsubaki Yabu, her playful smile vanished, replaced by a cold, serious gaze. Tsubaki Yabu agreed, stating that Mari-san would indeed never have taken action unless someone had instigated her. When one of the girls asked what they were talking about, Jimmy-sensei explained that Mari-san deeply resented Hananaka-san for causing their former teacher, Suzuki-sensei, to resign. He reasoned that once Mari-san realized the isolated Hananaka-san only had a teacher to rely on, she wanted to make her suffer the same isolation. He recalled how Hananaka-san had been left completely alone and distressed in the nurse's office. Jimmy-sensei concluded that by causing trouble to force his resignation, Mari-san aimed to push Hananaka-san into an even worse corner, killing two birds with one stone. Erika Tsutsuji suddenly calls out, telling him to wait. She protests that the way he is speaking makes it sound like something is wrong with them. He calmly clarifies that he is not blaming Tsubaki Yabu, addressing her directly by her student number. He explains that if such a person existed, Mari's sudden interest in him would have been a massive miscalculation, and they might even wish she had died on the roof. Jimmy-sensei expresses his sincere hope that no further harm will come to either Hananaka-san or Mari. Suddenly, Nagisa Okina delivers a violent kick that sends Jimmy-sensei flying across the hallway. Nagisa Okina looks down at him with utter contempt, telling him not to act so high and mighty based on his own assumptions, calling him a virgin. She warns him not to lecture them without any actual proof. She demands to know who he thinks he is to talk to them like that. Jimmy-sensei calmly replies that he is their teacher, addressing her as Nagisa Okina, student number 3. Nagisa Okina steps on him, declaring that his attitude is incredibly annoying. She brutally grinds her shoe directly onto Jimmy-sensei's head as he lies helpless on the floor. She sneers that teachers mean absolutely nothing to them, demanding he bring real evidence if he wants to lecture them. As she threatens him further, Tenjiku-sensei suddenly runs up and demands to know what they are doing. Tenjiku-sensei rushes to Jimmy-sensei's side to ask if he is alright, turning to confront Nagisa Okina in shock. Nagisa Okina casually feigns ignorance, claiming that the teacher simply tripped and fell on his own. Maki Oda joins in to mock him, but Tenjiku-sensei points out that she is stepping on his glasses, prompting a fake apology from Maki. Jimmy-sensei silently picks up his broken glasses, his face hidden in shadow as the girls walk away. Tenjiku-sensei watched in dismay as the girls walked away, lamenting the terrible thing things they had done to him. He calmly insisted he was fine, but she frantically argued that things were far from okay if this behavior continued. Clenching his fist, he firmly declared that no matter what happened, he would never resign from his post. His sudden, unwavering determination left Tenjiku-sensei completely taken aback. Jimmy-sensei looked at her with intense resolve, stating that he would stay because he is a teacher. With that, he brushed past her, leaving her standing alone in the quiet corridor. He politely excused himself since his working hours had already ended, leaving Tenjiku-sensei calling after him in vain. Jimmy-sensei walked away down the long school hallway, his figure growing smaller in the distance. Tenjiku-sensei stood alone in the corridor, watching him leave with a worried expression. As she turned to walk away, she noticed something small lying on the floor and wondered what it was. Picking it up, she examined the keychain, noticing the initials J and wondering if it belonged to Jimmy-sensei. She turned the keychain over in her hand, revealing the number 66 engraved on the back. Tenjiku-sensei stared at the number 66, deeply puzzled by its meaning. She groaned in frustration, trying to figure out what J and 66 could possibly stand for. Just then, Amari-sensei walked into the office and noticed that Tenjiku-sensei was still working late. Amari-sensei approached her desk, curiously asking about the keychain she was holding. Tenjiku-sensei explained that she had found it on the floor and suspected it belonged to Jimmy-sensei. Amari-sensei suggested that searching the initials online might help them identify the owner, surprising Tenjiku-sensei. When Tenjiku-sensei asked why that would work, Amari-sensei realized she had never been a homeroom teacher for a graduating class. Amari-sensei explained that the initials JA and 66 likely indicated a graduation commemorative gift. Although Tenjiku-sensei pointed out that there was no school name, Amari-sensei assured her it was a common way to abbreviate school names. She gave an example of how their own school, Suezono, would be abbreviated as SEN, meaning 66 stood for the 66th graduating class. Amari-sensei admitted they might not find the exact school immediately, but finding the name would be the key to locating the owner. A search engine page is opened on her computer screen. She types the initials JA and the word high school into the search bar. She immediately questions what she is doing, feeling guilty about digging into his private life, but she justifies it to herself, believing that Jimmy-sensei is definitely not normal and wanting to uncover even a glimpse of his true identity. Suddenly, a search result catches her attention. She successfully finds a match for Private Joan Academy and wonders if this is the right place. The name Joan Academy rings a bell, making her feel as though she has heard it somewhere before. As she looks closer, she notices online reviews mentioning an incident from 10 years ago. The reviews also bring up the unbelievable actions of a homeroom teacher. The posts reveal that the teacher's initial was J. Meanwhile, Jimmy-sensei walks down a busy street, completely unaware of her investigation. Back at her desk, Tenjiku-sensei stares at her monitor in disbelief. She tries to brush it off, telling herself that there is absolutely no way it could be him. Still, curiosity gets the better of her, and she wonders what kind of incident actually took place. With a quick click of her mouse, she decides to dig deeper. The webpage loads, revealing more detailed forum posts. Her eyes widen in sheer shock as she reads the horrifying details. The narration notes that someone once described Class 1 as a living hell. In a class filled with nothing but problem children, one figure stood out. If there was a teacher who absolutely refused to quit, no matter what they did to him, then he was certainly no ordinary educator. Tenjiku-sensei reads the words on the screen, whispering about a murderous problem teacher. The post accuses the teacher with the initial J of being a cold-blooded killer who escaped proper punishment, and she realizes that this refers to Jimmy-sensei. A chilling realization dawned that he might be the real monster of their school. Tenjiku-sensei stares at her computer screen in absolute shock, whispering Jimmy-sensei's name. Her eyes widen in horror as she reads the disturbing article on her monitor. She trembles as she reads the words accusing him of being a cold-blooded killer. Suddenly, Jimmy-sensei quietly calls out to her from behind, breaking the silence. Startled by his sudden presence, she freezes in fear. She shrieks in terror as he calmly asks her to return his lost keychain. He explains that he only realized he had lost it on his way home and came back because it is precious to him. Still shaken, she can only offer a weak, nervous response. She then carefully hands the keychain back to him. As he prepares to leave, she remains completely silent and tense. Unable to contain herself, she suddenly calls out and asks if he is angry with her. She nervously asks if he is upset that she went behind his back to pry into his private life. He stands quietly, looking at her with his usual expressionless face. He simply replies that he does not mind at all. He calmly explains that there is absolutely nothing he would be troubled by having others know. She is left utterly speechless as he turns around and begins to walk away. She wonders how he could possibly be so unbothered by what she discovered. She looks back at the computer screen, questioning if this horrific article could really be about him. She begins to hope that she simply jumped to conclusions and that the initial J refers to someone else entirely. Convincing herself that she must be wrong, she decides it is incredibly rude to treat a colleague like a murderer. She resolves to stop snooping into his past and let the matter go. Meanwhile, Jimmy-sensei walks down the quiet school hallway alone. Once out of sight, he pulls out a heavily stained, bloody cloth from his pocket. He tightly squeezes the blood-soaked fabric in his hand. He stares down at the bloody cloth with a cold, unreadable expression behind his glasses. Meanwhile, in the home economics classroom, several students gather to admire the beautifully decorated cupcakes Maki has made. They praise her incredible sense, comparing her creations to professional store-bought sweets, which she smugly accepts as a popular social media creator. She even boasts about recently helping with a fashion magazine's design, prompting her friend to declare that she is practically a professional. As she continues to brag about her connections in the editorial department, Momo watches the scene in silence. Meanwhile, Momo looks down at her own poorly made, collapsed cupcake sitting sadly on a tray. A classmate mockingly points out how terrible Momo's creation looks compared to the others. The other girls join in, jeering at Momo for being blacklisted from modeling, which prompts Momo to angrily defend her status. They then turn their mockery toward Mari's plain cupcake, but Mari calmly insists that she only cares about putting her heart into her baking. When Mari happily wonders if Jimmy-sensei will eat her cupcake, Momo reacts with immediate disgust. Seeing them isolated, Maki smugly tells the two outcasts to clean up after everyone else. As she walks away, she deliberately knocks over their cupcakes, smashing them onto the tray. Both Mari and Momo are horrified to see their hard work ruined, and Momo furiously confronts Maki for her cruel action. Maki merely feigns innocence, mockingly pretending she has no idea what Momo is talking about. She then turns her attention directly to Momo with a cold expression. Maki demands that Momo stop calling her by her first name, claiming that everyone is annoyed by her overly familiar attitude. She brutally adds that they are no longer friends and insults Momo's appearance, telling her to read the room. Momo is outraged at being called ugly, but before she can fully lash out, a sudden scream echoes through the room. Mari suddenly hurled her dishes directly at Maki, causing a massive crash. A stunned Momo asks Mari if she threw it to defend her, but Mari furiously clarifies that she is only angry about her own ruined cupcake. Mari snaps that she couldn't care less about Momo's face, leaving their teacher completely speechless at their chaotic behavior. Watching the chaos unfold, Tsubaki coldly warns Maki not to get carried away. In response, Maki urges her to stop fighting at the level of bottom feeders, calling such behavior pathetic. Although she offers a half-hearted apology, Tsubaki sighs and complains that she has suddenly lost all her energy. Because of that, Tsubaki demanded that Maki finish up all the remaining cooking prep in her place. Seeing this, Nagisa chimed in, saying it was perfect since Maki was already so good at this kind of work. Maki weakly tried to object, but her protests went completely ignored. Instead, the other girls dumped their tasks on her as well before walking away, leaving Erika to watch in silence. Left completely alone, Maki could only stare down at the work she had been forced to take on. Meanwhile, Erika quietly slipped out of the classroom and walked down the empty hallway. Back in the room, Maki stood in silence, abandoned by her supposed friend. Outside, Erika paused while Momo approached Maki to confront her. Momo stared at Maki and asked if she was really okay with how things were. She bluntly questioned whether Maki honestly found it fun to hang out with people who treated her so poorly. Momo pointed out that while she herself was still around, she had always been the center of attention. However, she explained that now that she was no longer part of their group, the dynamic had shifted. She warned Maki that the balance of power among the girls had become completely distorted. As a result, it now looked as though Maki had been relegated to the very bottom of their social ladder. Momo reminded her that she was actually quite popular on social media and had even worked with professionals. She suggested that Maki did not need to rely on those girls to succeed, but Maki firmly insisted that she was happy. Angrily, Maki snapped that she did not need Momo's pity, declaring that her life had become much more enjoyable since Momo left. Maki screamed at Momo to never speak to her so familiarly again, leaving Momo utterly bewildered. Her sudden outburst startled Tsubaki and Nagisa, who watched in shock as Maki stormed away. Nearby, Jimmy-sensei and Aishitake-sensei quietly observed the tense situation unfolding between the students. After the dramatic confrontation, a heavy silence settled over the empty school corridor. Later, that silence is broken as Momo loudly complains about why only they are being punished with after-school cleaning duty. She tries to shift the blame to Maki, but Tsubaki points out that Ashitaki-sensei reported them as the ones who initiated the trouble. Hearing this, Mari plays the victim, claiming she was terrified when Momo suddenly flipped the cake, leaving Erika in disbelief. Mari continues her act, leaning uncomfortably close to Jimmy-sensei as she laments her ruined cake, prompting him to tell her to back away and focus on cleaning. As they clean, Erika questions Jimmy-sensei about why he is staying past his usual working hours instead of leaving immediately like he normally does. He calmly explains that as the homeroom teacher of Class 1A, he felt it was his duty to properly face and address this situation. He adds with a serious expression that he is doing this simply because he is a teacher. His dedicated words leave Momo and the others staring at him in quiet awe. However, he quickly ruins the touching moment by explaining that he submitted an overtime pay request, meaning he will work diligently as long as he is paid. Erika sighs and wonders why Maki is so determined to stay in their group despite how poorly she is treated. She reasons that with Maki's current popularity, leaving the group wouldn't even affect her. When Erika muses that breaking free from complicated female friendships is easy once you find the courage, Nagisa bluntly points out that Erika has always been a loner anyway. Meanwhile, Jimmy-sensei quietly stares at his laptop screen. He wonders aloud why things turned out this way as he reviews the online posts. The scene shifts to a girl with bobbed hair typing furiously on her computer in her room. She thinks bitterly about how arrogant these lowlifes are acting, just because they decided to stick together. She continues typing, declaring to herself that Momo is currently worthless and has no right to tell her what to do. She looks at the malicious online posts targeting Momo. Smiling mockingly, she complains about how stubbornly persistent Momo is being. She stares intensely at the screen, reflecting on how she used multiple burner accounts to finally drag Momo down to this level. She fumes with jealousy, complaining that she doesn't care if Momo is a model, because she is always trying to show off, even though she believes her own sense of style is far superior. She sneers that despite everyone calling Momo cute, her face is probably just the result of plastic surgery, taking comfort in the fact that people online agree with her. Believing that Momo deserves to be punished for letting a little success go to her head, She rants about how incredibly annoying the model's very existence is to her. Sitting alone at her desk, she stared blankly ahead as she plotted her next move. Turning back to her computer, she realized that to completely ruin Momo beyond any hope of recovery, she would need to gather a little more ammunition. A malicious smile spread across her face as a brilliant, wicked idea suddenly came to her. She vowed that this time she would bring about an end so absolute that even their virgin teacher would not be able to save Momo, fully intending to steal and take over her life. Maki is praised by her friends for her cute bag and charm, reflecting on the hierarchy that exists even within friendships. As they walk, her classmates continue to shower her with compliments, calling her stylish and everyone's idol while she casually mentions she bought the charm in Harajuku. But just as Maki boasts about her online presence, her friends suddenly get distracted by someone else walking by. The girls spot the actual model, Momo Hananaka, and immediately notice that she is carrying the exact same bag and charm as Maki. Because of that, the classmates cruelly mock Maki, saying the items look completely different on a real model, leaving Maki to worry about her social standing collapsing. Back in the present, Jimi-sensei calls out to Momo Hananaka. She looks back at him with a blank, neutral expression. Sitting across from her in the guidance room, Jimi-sensei asks if she understands why she was summoned. Momo smiles knowingly, thinking she has figured out his motive. She teasingly asks if seeing her in her summer uniform made him want to make another move on her, but he flatly dismisses the idea. Momo continues to tease him, telling him not to be shy now that he finally appreciates how cute she is, but he interrupts her. Jimi-sensei bluntly reveals the real reason for the meeting, informing her that she ranked dead last in the entire grade on the recent exams. Suddenly, Tenjiku-sensei bursts into the room, startled by the commotion. Tenjiku-sensei then looks down at Momo's test papers with a serious expression. While Tenjiku-sensei praises Momo for attending school despite her difficulties, she admits that these terrible test scores are unacceptable. Momo pouts and defends herself, explaining that she hates studying and only chose this school because she liked the cute uniform. Tenjiku-sensei warns her that if her grades do not improve, her extracurricular activities might be in jeopardy, leaving Momo stunned. Tenjiku-sensei clarifies that the school might have to revoke permission for her modeling and entertainment career. Momo stares in utter disbelief as the gravity of the situation sinks. She looks down, her playful attitude completely vanishing. Tenjiku-sensei calls out to her gently, but Momo remains completely silent. Momo despairs internally, realizing that losing her career would ruin her when she is already at rock bottom. Sitting there, she asks in disbelief if she is really expected to just endure more and keep trying. Her teachers look back at her in silence as the atmosphere in the room grows increasingly tense. Breaking the silence, Jimi-sensei bluntly tells her that she must keep trying, leaving her completely stunned. He coldly explains that while he knows nothing about the entertainment industry, she will repeat a year if she continues like this. Shocked by his bluntness, Hananaka-san can only ask if he is actually serious. After the meeting, the heavy silence of the school hallway lingers outside the closed door. Back in the staff room, the teachers return to their desks to continue their work. Looking over at him, Tenjiku-sensei sighs and expresses how deeply she feels sorry for Hananaka-san. She argues that even if Jimi-sensei does not care about show business, the girl was truly shining in her work. She points out that she was highly popular and on the verge of a major breakthrough, making a ban on her activities incredibly cruel. With a worried expression, she wonders aloud if there is anything they can possibly do to help her. However, Jimi-sensei looks at her with a flat gaze and firmly reminds her that they are teachers. He explains that their only job is to guide Hananaka-san so she does not repeat a year, prompting a frustrated sigh from his colleague. She rests her head in her hand, feeling completely exhausted by his rigid attitude. Staring at him, she begins to feel deeply unsettled by his lack of empathy. She thinks to herself that he behaves as if he does not possess a human heart at all. This cold behavior makes her wonder if those dark internet rumors about him might actually be true. Suddenly she gasps as she realizes the dangerous direction of her thoughts. Panicking, she quickly apologizes to Jimi-sensei, terrified that she has crossed a line by bringing up such a sensitive topic. She quickly reassures herself that someone who would jump off a roof to save a student could not possibly be heartless. Recalling how he smiled in front of the students, she wishes he would show that side of himself more often. In response, Jimi-sensei merely stares back at her with a completely blank, unreadable expression. When she awkwardly begs him to smile, he bluntly asks if smiling is part of a teacher's job, leaving her speechless. Meanwhile, Hananaka-san sits alone in the library, enduring the quiet whispers of the students around her. Nearby, two girls excitedly discuss a lipstick recommended on social media by a popular first-year student named Maki. As another classmate joins in to praise Maki's great sense of style, Hananaka-san sits nearby, listening in silence. One of the girls then points out that her friend used to be a big fan of Hananaka-san. The other girl dismisses this, claiming Momo is washed up now since she completely stopped updating her social media accounts. Unable to take it anymore, Momo snaps and yells at them to shut up, because she is trying to study, scaring them away. Curious, Momo looks up Otamaki's social media profile on her phone. She is surprised to see that Otamaki is actually quite popular for an ordinary high schooler. Examining the photos, Momo notes that while they are heavily edited, Otamaki's sense of style is actually decent. She scrolls further and finds a photo of Maki posing happily with her group of friends. Momo thinks to herself that Maki is still playing pretend friends and clearly has not learned her lesson. Looking closely at the cheerful group photo, Momo reflects on the superficial nature of Maki's social circle. She realizes that despite the smiles, there was not a single true friend among them. Suddenly, a classmate interrupts her thoughts, calling out to her. The classmate asks if she was not supposed to be studying, while another girl rudely tells her to go elsewhere. Momo reminds herself that she must study to avoid repeating a year, especially since the modeling world is waiting for her comeback. However, she is shocked when she spots online comments comparing her to Otomaki and claiming Otomaki is cuter. In a panic, Momo demands that Tsubaki Yabu declare who is cuter, but Tsubaki bluntly replies that she dislikes both of them. Joining the conversation, Wally-san criticizes Maki's amateurish attempt at being a stylish influencer. She reassures Momo that since Momo has 10 times more followers, there is no reason to worry. Touched by the support, Momo thanks her and Wally-san casually waves it off. However, Wally-san immediately adds with a sweet smile that she does believe Momo is indeed washed up. While classmates shout insults at Vonley-san in the background, Maki approaches the two of them. Maki mockingly greets them, calling them the hated duo of the class. When Vonley-san asks what she wants, Maki admits she has some business, though she would prefer not to talk to them at all. Maki looks at them with a cold, determined expression. She asks Hananaka-san if she remembered her mentioning that she had previously worked with a professional, which Hananaka-san recalled as helping with a fashion magazine design. Hananaka-san mockingly asked which incompetent editorial department would hire an absolute amateur like her. But Maki brushed it off, saying that was not what she wanted to talk about. Maki continued, bringing up how things worked in this particular industry. She explained that she thought it was only polite to greet her senior, leaving Hananaka Momo utterly confused about what kind of senior she meant. Maki claimed she had no such intentions at first, but the editorial department easily greenlit the project she pitched to them. She then smugly revealed the shocking news that she was actually going to become a model herself. With a smug smile, Maki declared that they would be colleagues from now on. She offered a mockingly sweet greeting to Hananaka Momo, who forced a smile while silently vowing to get back at her someday. Hananaka Momo reeled in disbelief, warning herself to make sure she did not get tripped up by her new rival. Hananaka-san stared at her phone, reading messages from her manager asking to discuss future work and requesting a call. However, she realized that there was no actual job offer waiting for her. Feeling completely left behind by Maki, she slumped in disappointment. She lamented that studying hard was pointless without any work, feeling utterly defeated and hopeless. Meanwhile, Tenju-sensei reacted with shock upon hearing that Hananaka-san had suddenly given up on her studies. She worried deeply because the makeup exams were scheduled for the very next week. Banri-san, walking nearby, recalled Maki, boastfully declaring that they were now professional colleagues. She explained that Hananaka-san had suddenly become like an empty shell after that encounter. Panicking, Tenjiku-sensei pressed Jimmy-sensei for a solution, noting that Hananaka-san's frequent absences made repeating the year inevitable if she failed. She warned that at this rate, Hananaka-san would lose both her modeling career and her academic future. Jimmy-sensei remained quiet, calmly adjusting his glasses as he listened to her concerns. Instead of addressing the crisis, he turned his attention to Banri-san. He calmly reminded her that the chemistry assignment notebook was due today and urged her not to forget it. Banri-san quickly replied that she had it with her right now, while Jimmy-sensei waited silently. She then handed the notebook over to him. He accepted it and prepared to take his leave without saying anything else. Dumbfounded by his indifference, Tenjiku-sensei demanded to know what he planned to do about Hananaka-san. She yelled after him as he walked away, while Banri-san watched his departure in silence. Banri-san softly muttered his name, staring in the direction he had gone. Meanwhile, Hananaka-san sat alone on the school stairs, scrolling through social media on her phone. She scoffed at Maki's post, which teased a secret announcement. She muttered that Maki was clearly dying to brag about becoming a model. Her frustration grew as she questioned why this was happening. Suddenly, she burst into a furious scream of rage. She ranted about Maki's appearance, calling her short and flat-chested, and wondered what trick she had used to get the job. Nearby, other classmates approached Maki to ask if the rumors about her modeling were true. Nagisa excitedly asked if she could tell her clubmates, but Maki playfully told her to stop since nothing was officially decided yet. Hiding under the stairs, a frustrated Hwa Jong-san overheard her classmates laughing and gossiping about her. They gossiped about how quiet she had become lately, noting that she was likely too smart to be unfazed by having her position stolen. The girls then laughed about her being on the verge of repeating a grade, mocking her for being worse at studying than the sports club members. Hearing their harsh words, the dejected girl could only silently agree that her situation was truly pathetic. Nearby, Genji continued to boast to her friends about how the former model was now isolated and stripped of her pride. She confidently declared that in the end, Hwa Jong-san was never really that big of a deal. Smiling proudly, she added that even an amateur like herself could easily stand on equal footing if she actually tried. However, one of her classmates gently warned her to be careful with her attitude. Another girl teased her that she might also face repeating a grade if she got too busy, but she quickly laughed it off. She insisted that they should not lump her together with the failing model, claiming her own test scores were still in the top half. Her friends playfully apologized to appease her as they walked away together. Left behind in the stairwell, the devastated twin-tailed girl muttered once more that she was truly finished. She felt deeply frustrated with herself for being unable to say a single word back to them. Later, she visited a bookstore and stared in shock at a magazine display. She frantically hoped that she had simply seen it, reasoning that her rival could not possibly be featured yet. She sadly recalled how until just recently she had always been the one gracing the cover. Clutching a book to her chest, she stood frozen in the aisle as her confidence crumbled. She tried to comfort herself by thinking that despite her current pathetic state, she was still incredibly cute. She repeated the thought, desperately clinging to her self-worth as a model. Her internal voice grew quieter as she kept whispering to herself that she was cute. Eventually, she walked away from the shelves, looking utterly defeated and lonely. The next day, she slammed her papers onto a desk in a fit of rage. She marched right up to confront her homeroom teacher inside the classroom. Unfazed by her anger, Zijin Senjin calmly reminded her that she had still not submitted her chemistry notebook. She grabbed his clothes and furiously demanded to know if he felt even a little bit bad for her. She aggressively grabbed his collar, demanding that he call her cute. After her outburst, she looked down with a tense, conflicted expression. Meanwhile, he looked back at her calmly, adjusting his glasses. She blushes deeply, turning her head away in embarrassment. She then desperately begs him to call her cute, her voice trembling. However, he merely stares back at her with a completely blank, unbothered expression. She asks him if dealing with this is part of a teacher's job. Suddenly, she dramatically flings her top open in front of him. Jimmy-sensei sighs at her sloppy attempt, but she threatens to make him quit if he does not comply. She declares that she is completely serious this time, and will do whatever it takes to defeat him. Despite her dramatic outburst, he remains completely unfazed. She boldly claims she is willing to throw away her virginity just to get back at him. She reasons that even he would have to yield if they created an undeniable established fact. He mutters that if he is going to lose everything anyway, he might as well take her down with him, leaving her confused. They stand in silence as she fidgets awkwardly under his intense gaze. He suddenly apologizes, breaking the tense atmosphere. He bluntly tells her that he has absolutely no physical reaction, making her efforts completely useless. She protests that she is risking everything by exposing herself, but he flatly rejects her. She stands there in disbelief at his cold, unwavering rejection. He tells her to put her clothes on, criticizing her for repeating the same foolish trick over and over. He points out that evaluating her appearance has absolutely nothing to do with her academic grades. When he tries to bring up her chemistry notebook instead, she tearfully yells that he just does not understand her. Later, Hwanzin sat on her bed, despairing over whether she was completely cut off from the entertainment industry. She lamented failing every audition and falling hopelessly behind in school due to her absences, wondering if her future was ruined. Overwhelmed by anxiety, she collapsed face down onto her desk, surrounded by her schoolbooks. She cried out in sheer frustration that everything, both her career and her school life, was falling apart. Desperate to reassure herself, she stared into the mirror, telling herself that being cute was all that mattered. She insisted that her cuteness was her absolute lifeline, even as Jimmy-sensei stood quietly behind her in the room. She screamed that without her cuteness, her entire life would be completely over. Jimmy-sensei simply stared back at her with a calm, unbothered expression. He then bluntly asked her what any of that was supposed to mean to him. As she looked up in surprise, he calmly explained that he couldn't possibly understand her feelings since he wasn't her. He extended his hand, stating there was only one thing he actually knew for sure. Looking directly at her, he demanded that Hananaka-san hand over her chemistry notebook. He warned her that if she failed to do so, her academic grades would be completely ruined. Later, back in the staff room, Jimmy-sensei began to recount the outcome of their interaction. Tenjiku-sensei eagerly asked him if the girl had finally handed in her chemistry notebook. He flatly replied that she had not handed it in at all. He explained that while he would overlook it for today, she would lose points if she didn't submit it by tomorrow, prompting a panicked cry from Tenjiku-sensei. He coldly added that they were ultimately nothing more than strangers. He reasoned that if she were to drop out of high school, he would no longer be her teacher, leaving Tenjiku-sensei deeply unsettled. He pointed out that a teacher cannot do their job if they get dragged into a student's personal matters, reminding her that Hwajing-san is not the only student they have to worry about. He continued by noting that she has her own class to look after, while he has his own responsibilities to focus on. With a serious expression, he declared that all he can do is simply fulfill his duties. But just as he spoke, the classroom door suddenly slid open. He finished his thought by stating it was because he is a teacher, just as Maki stood in the doorway. This unexpected arrival left him staring in complete surprise. Tenjiku-sensei noticed Maki in the staff room and asked what brought her there. Maki replied that she'd only come because the creepy teacher with glasses had summoned her. When she demanded to know what he wanted, Jimmy-sensei merely shrugged and claimed not to know, leaving her utterly confused. Jimmy-sensei then asked her what she thought the reason was, leaving the true meaning of his question a mystery. Tenjiku-sensei wondered if he was playing a guessing game, while Maki complained that she had not even wanted to come. Jimmy-sensei calmly acknowledged her reluctance to visit the staff room. Tenjiku-sensei found the student's behavior rather strange under the circumstances. Jimmy-sensei pointed out that Maki was normally an extremely rebellious student toward him. He found it highly unusual that she would obediently answer his summons without trying to set him up. He suggested that she must have had some guilty conscience or reason in mind to make her comply. Jimmy-sensei then addressed her formally by her full name Maki Oda, catching her completely off guard. She stared back at him in tense silence, her anxiety visibly growing. Maki hesitantly asked what this was all about. She paused, her mind racing as she tried to guess his intentions. She suddenly wondered if he wanted to talk about her new modeling career, startling Tenjiku-sensei. Maki laughed nervously, claiming she had wanted to keep it a secret, but Jimmy-sensei quickly cut her off. He bluntly declared that he did not care about her private life in the slightest. His cold rejection left Maki completely frozen in shock. He handed her a document, explaining that she simply needed to submit an application for her entertainment activities. With that out of the way, Jimmy-sensei turned to the actual main topic of their meeting. Maki looked incredibly nervous as she waited for him to speak. He revealed that she had still not submitted her chemistry notebook, which was due that very day. Meanwhile, Hananaka-san walked down the hallway, looking back with a frustrated expression. She suddenly stopped in her tracks, startled by something ahead. She angrily ranted about Jimmy-sensei's strict warning that she would lose her credits if she didn't submit her notebook by tomorrow. She continued her furious complaints, calling the teacher's tone and attitude completely creepy. Her angry tirade was cut short when she suddenly noticed someone standing right in front of her. Seeing Maki, Hananaka-san realized that she was not the only one who had failed to hand in her chemistry notebook. She expressed relief that she was not alone, but Maki remained silent with a dark shadowed expression. Without saying a word, Maki began to walk past her in the narrow corridor. Suddenly, Maki aggressively shoved Hananaka-san aside, catching her completely off guard. Hananaka-san cried out in pain as she fell, while Maki offered a completely insincere apology. Maki looked back with a cruel smile, mocking Hananaka-san by saying she does not even notice people of a lower level. Hananaka-san was left trembling on the floor, deeply shaken by the cruel insult. Maki walked away down the hallway, leaving her former friend collapsed on the ground. Hananaka-san let out a bitter, quiet chuckle as she sat on the floor. She then screamed after Maki in a rage, pointing out that Maki had not submitted her notebook either. Mari-san suddenly appeared and called out to her, prompting Hananaka-san to look up in surprise. Hananaka-san suddenly declared with tearful determination that she was going to do her absolute best. She explained to Mari-san that while modeling jobs were scarce, she could at least beat Maki to submitting her chemistry notebook. Hananaka-san begged to copy Mari-san's notebook, but Mari-san flatly refused because she had already submitted hers, earning a whiny complaint. As Hananaka-san kept calling her stingy, Maki silently watched them bicker from around the corner. Nearby, someone quietly pulled out a smartphone to capture the scene. The phone screen displayed a series of photos capturing Maki shoving Hananaka-san to the floor. The user prepared to post the incriminating photos online, hovering over the tweet button. The next morning, students gather around the shoe lockers, whispering about the shocking rumor that has just surfaced online. Walking toward the main building, they wonder if the scandalous post is actually true, agreeing that the situation is incredibly wild either way. Meanwhile, Maki stands completely frozen in her room, her face pale with absolute shock. Her mug slips from her hand and shatters on the floor as she gasps in utter disbelief. Flashbacks of her classmates whispering and looking down on her flash through her mind. The online article boldly exposes Maki as the classmate who leaked the scandal about the popular model, Hananaka-san, framing it as a case of insidious bullying. Seeing her own face plastered all over the internet as a bully, Maki screams in sheer horror. Staring at her phone in the dark, she panics as she realizes yesterday's events have already become major national news. She desperately wonders how this could happen, knowing that no one should have been able to trace the leak back to her. As she reads the harsh comments mocking her and comparing her unfavorably to Hananaka-san, she weakly tries to deny the accusations. Meanwhile, a professional photography studio is bustling with activity as cameras flash. The crew focuses their lenses on their subject, capturing every angle under the bright studio lights. At the center of the shoot, Hananaka-san flashes a sweet, flawless smile, reclaiming her spotlight as a professional model. A mysterious girl watches from behind as Hananaka-san later faces a crowd of eager reporters. They warmly congratulate her on her return to the industry, prompting her to thank them and promise to do her absolute best. One reporter then asks if the rumors surrounding her absence were entirely due to bullying. Another pressed further, questioning if the story about her attacking a teacher was just a misunderstanding. To their surprise, she flatly denied that it was a misunderstanding. She explained that she had deliberately behaved in a misleading way and caused trouble for her teacher, even taking her anger out on him recently. When Nagisa Okina asked what she meant by misleading behavior, Momo Hananaka casually admitted that she had exposed herself to him. This shocking revelation left Nagisa Okina completely stunned as she began to suspect her classmates' true motives. Momo Hananaka looked back with a flustered expression, realizing how her words sounded. Nagisa Okina then directly asked if she actually liked the teacher. Maki strongly rejected that idea, declaring that the teacher was honestly the absolute worst as a human being. A hand angrily crumpled a magazine cover featuring Momo Hananaka's smiling face. Maki pointed out that her rival's face never seemed to appear on the magazine anymore. She mockingly asked what had happened to Momo Hananaka's modeling career, causing her rival to call out her name in frustration. Maki went so far as to mockingly suggest she had found a sugar daddy, but Momo Hananaka cut her off, accusing her of being behind everything. She angrily accused Maki of using Mari to set her up and ruin her reputation. Maki calmly dismissed the accusation, stating she would never do such a thing because she was not like her. She added that while she knew the blackboard incident was their doing, she was disgusted to find out they had leaked information online. Ultimately, Maki declared she did not care about the truth anymore, noting that while Momo Hananaka's rejection by Jimmy-sensei's was slightly different, her bad actions were still a fact. However, Momo Hananaka countered that if Maki truly wanted to compete with her, that was a different story. She told her that if she actually possessed real talent, she should stop relying on Tsubaki and the others. She challenged Maki to face her head-on in a fair competition. Later, Momo Hananaka cheerfully boasted about submitting her chemistry notebook and receiving a passing grade, showing it off with a smile. She bid them farewell and told them to do their best, while Mari watched her leave in silence. Running up to Mari, she proudly announced she got a B on her assignment, only for Mari to coldly reveal she received an A. Left standing in shock, she could only listen as Mari muttered about how annoying she was. Meanwhile, Maki sits alone, overwhelmed by the hateful comments flooding her screen. She desperately tries to defend herself online, but realizes her efforts are completely futile. Since it wasn't Mari, she becomes convinced that Jimmy-sensei, the creepy teacher with glasses, is the one behind her exposure. She reasons that Jimmy-sensei, being a virgin who was hit on by Hananaka-san, must have a crush on her and use some trick to expose Maki. She continues to fume, convinced that the teacher is abusing his position to play favorites. Suddenly her eyes widen as she spots a new update on her phone. She sees that Hanaka-san has posted a cheerful update announcing her return to social media. Staring at the screen, she watches in dark silence as welcoming comments flood Hananaka-san's post. She is consumed by intense jealousy, bitterly wondering why Hananaka-san always gets to have everything go her way. She remembers Hananaka-san dismissively saying that her achievements were no big deal. She recalls her rival claiming that she was not even cute. Looking up, she tells herself that she is the one who deserves success. She insists that she is better just as someone calls out her name, Maki. Tsubaki Yabu approaches her with the other girls, asking if she is alright. Startled, Maki looks up to see her classmate standing before her. When Maki tries to apologize, Tsubaki Yabu warmly reassures her that they were just worried because they are friends. Tsubaki Yabu expresses sympathy over the harsh online rumors and how they ruined Maki's upcoming modeling job. Maki complains that she did nothing wrong, and Tsubaki Yabu gently agrees with her. However, Tsubaki Yabu asks if she is really willing to let things end like this. With a dark look, Tsubaki Yabu offers a dangerous proposal while a bottle of acid is placed on the table. Meanwhile, Jimmy-sensei inspects the chemical storage cabinet, noting the bottles of sulfuric and nitric acid. He quickly realizes with a sigh that one of the acid bottles is missing from the shelf. He laments that this theft means he will have to work overtime yet again. Tsubaki asked if they knew about acid attacks, explaining that it involves throwing corrosive acid on someone to burn their skin. The other girls reacted with fear, wondering what she was talking about, as rumors began to spread. Someone whispered that a bottle of chemicals had gone missing from the science lab. Tsubaki smiled, assuring him she was not suggesting they actually go through with it seriously. She casually suggested that splashing just a little on her clothes or hair would serve as a good threat. Since Hananaka-san was a model, Tsubaki reasoned she would get scared and either quit or transfer schools. That way, they would never have to look at her face at school ever again. Tsubaki added with a chilling smile that even if they slipped and hit her, her father would cover it up. Looking at the bottle of hydrochloric acid, Maki trembled as she realized what it was. She muttered to herself that this was clearly going way too far. She stared down at her desk, where a magazine featuring Hananaka-san lay open. She recalled Hananaka-san's challenging her to face her head-on if she truly had talent. Remembering the demand to stop relying on Tsubaki's group, Maki desperately insisted that she could do it too. Her internal cry echoed as she struggled with her intense feelings of inferiority. Meanwhile, graded exam papers lay piled up on a teacher's desk. Jimmy-sensei sat quietly at his desk, diligently grading the papers. He stared at the paper in silence, carefully reviewing her answers. Suddenly, Tenjiku-sensei cheered in relief, celebrating the positive outcome. He sat quietly at his desk, looking thoughtful as he reviewed the student records. She then rushed over to announce that Hananaka-san had also barely managed to pass her modern Japanese makeup exam, eagerly asking how she had fared in his subject. Without saying a word, he simply stamped a passing mark on his computer screen. He then dryly noted that she had barely scraped by in his class as well. Hearing the news, Hananaka-san was overcome with immense relief and cried tears of joy. Tenjiku-sensei and Akashi discussed how Hananaka-san had now successfully cleared every single makeup exam she took. The female teacher happily pointed out that this meant her entertainment career was safe, though Jimmy-sensei remained completely silent. When Akashi questioned his lack of reaction, Jimmy-sensei flatly replied that celebrating was not within a teacher's scope of work, while Akashi grumbled that he could at least show some happiness. Amari watched the exchange with a sweat drop. Jimmy-sensei then redirected the conversation, pointing out that a student in Tenjiku-sensei's own class had actually failed their makeup exam, shocking her. As Tenjiku-sensei realized this was true, Jimmy-sensei advised her to focus on her own class instead of worrying about others. He coldly added that if a teacher does not watch carefully, they cannot save those who need saving. Akashi wondered why Jimmy-sensei was being so unusually sharp and prickly today. Amari brought up the missing bottle of chemicals, and Akashi recalled that Jibzi-sei would have to report it to his superiors if it was not found this week. Students whispered in the hallway about how Jimmy-sensei had been working overtime every single day to search for the missing chemical. Jimmy-sensei walked down the quiet corridor, looking exhausted from his relentless search. Hananaka-san watched him from a distance, looking nervous and hesitant. He noticed her presence and asked if she had some business at the staff room. Fidgeting nervously, she timidly asked if she could hear the results of her makeup exams. Tearfully, Momo confessed that this was the very first time in her life she had ever studied so hard. She explained that failing after finally returning to work would have been unbearable, though Jimmy-sensei dryly suggested she should always study like that. He then turned his attention to Mari-san, who was standing nearby in the hallway. Jimmy-sensei credited Mari-san for the success, prompting Momo to express her sincere gratitude to her classmate. Mari-san was completely taken aback, staring in utter disbelief at the sudden praise. Jimmy-sensei explained that, while he could have taught her, peer tutoring is often highly effective. He emphasized that this achievement was thanks to Mari-san's dedication, making Momo realize with excitement that she had actually passed. He warmly praised both of them for their hard work and effort. Jimmy-sensei smiled gently as Momo joyfully hugged a stunned Mari-san, while Tenjiku-sensei watched the heartwarming scene from the doorway. She recalled how the teacher had once claimed they were mere strangers despite everything. Smiling softly, she realized that such a cold attitude was just like him. Meanwhile, out in the school hallway, the other teachers gathered to discuss the situation. Tenjiku-sensei eagerly offered to help Jimmy-sensei search for the missing chemical bottle, promising they would find it quickly if they worked together. She then suggested that they all head to a trendy new cafe near the station afterward to celebrate Momo's success. However, Jimmy-sensei flatly refused the invitation, stating he would search for the bottle on his own and needed no assistance. Left with no choice, the female teacher decided they should just go to the cafe without him, and the others agreed. Jimmy-sensei then walked away down the corridor, leaving them behind. As one of the classmates went to grab her bag, Momo looked at her phone and noticed a post about the popular cafe. Suddenly, she gasped in shock at what she saw on the screen. Momo stared at the image of a cake, wondering if it could really be what she suspected. She rushed to a classroom where Maki was standing alone and looking downcast. Maki kept her head lowered, her face hidden in the shadows. Looking up, Maki coldly acknowledged Momo's presence, dismissively asking why she was there. Maki demanded that Momo get out of her way so she could go celebrate, but Momo firmly ordered her not to move. Maki then held up a dark bottle, warning Momo that she would regret it if she took another step. Momo stared in disbelief, asking her what she was holding. She suddenly realized with horror that this was the very chemical bottle Jimmy-sensei had been searching for. The bottle was clearly labeled as hydrochloric acid. When Momo asked what would happen if it got on her, Maki coldly explained that it would cause severe burns, revealing her intent to throw it at her. The hallway outside remained completely silent and empty. Horrified, Momo asked if Maki would really resort to something so extreme just because Momo's career was going well. Maki suddenly snapped, screaming that she was not doing this because she wanted to. She tearfully explained that if Momo would just disappear from her sight, things would be different. Maki cried out that this was her only remaining option to stay in Tsubaki's social group. Momo quietly asked her if staying in that group was really that important to her. Maki bitterly questioned why everyone respected Hananaka-san, wondering if it was because of her famous parentage or some extraordinary power. But she retorted that Tsubaki had absolutely nothing to do with this. She gently reminded her former friend that she was supposed to just be herself. When Momo Hananaka urged her to compete fairly instead of resorting to underhanded tricks, Maki furiously shouted back that she would have done so if she actually could. Maki admitted in frustration that she would have surpassed her rival long ago if it were truly possible, recalling how easily Momo Hananaka won people over. She remembered the effortless charm her classmate displayed while basking in the spotlight. Maki blamed Momo Hananaka's very existence for her own constant failures. She recalled how others always assumed natural-born celebrities were simply on a different level. Maki despaired that as long as her rival was around, she was destined to keep losing forever. While Momo Hananaka tried to understand her words, Makisi suddenly noticed someone else and politely called out to them. She requested the return of the chemical bottle she had been searching for, which was held by Jimmy-sensei. Momo Hananaka asked how long he had been standing there, and Jimmy-sensei calmly revealed he had heard their entire conversation. He questioned her about taking chemicals without permission, asking if she intended to threaten Momo Hananaka. The teacher flatly stated that resorting to such extreme measures would be completely pointless. He then addressed Maki by her full name and student number. Jimmy-sensei bluntly called her empty, leaving Maki completely stunned and speechless. He continued to criticize her, stating that everything she did was honestly just utterly hollow. Infuriated by his harsh words, Maki lashed out and called him a stupid four eyes. She argued that he was the one responsible for starting all of this. Maki accused him of exposing her online, but Jimmy-sensei merely asked what she was talking about. When she insisted he had posted about her, Jimmy-sensei calmly asked why he would ever do such a thing. He pointed out that she clearly had not been listening to him at all. The teacher declared that he did not care about her private life in the slightest. He explained that her online presence and actions outside of school meant absolutely nothing to him. Jimmy-sensei concluded that unless it directly concerned his job, he had no desire to know anything about her. He went on to explain that the school delegates online monitoring to a specialized contractor, surprising Erika. He then coldly reminded Maki that he was not her friend. He firmly asserted his role, stating that he was strictly her teacher. Maki laughed bitterly at his words, suggesting that Hananaka-san must have been the sole exception to his rule. While Erika looked on in confusion, Maki angrily declared that she would never believe a word he said. She accused him of being completely infatuated with Hananaka-san. Overwhelmed with frustration, Maki began to cry, complaining about how everyone treated her classmate. As she screamed Hananaka-san's name in despair, a dark thought of what might happen began to form. She imagined a terrifying scenario where his hand might slip during a chemical experiment. The mere thought of such an accident left Maki completely frozen in terror. In her dark fantasy, she envisioned the dangerous substance splashing onto Erika. Erika was shown looking utterly shocked while holding the chemical bottle. The imaginary splash erupted violently before them, leaving both girls paralyzed with fear. Erika's eye widened in sheer panic as the reality of the danger sank in. Meanwhile, outside the school, Nagisa turned to Tsubaki with a serious question. She wondered what they would do if Maki had actually committed a terrible act. Nagisa directly asked Tsubaki if she had any genuine intention of helping their classmate. Tsubaki looked back at her, her expression remaining calm and unreadable. She then offered a subtle, mysterious smile, leaving her true feelings completely hidden. Meanwhile, as Jimmy-sensei knelt by the spilled chemical bottle on the floor, Hananaka-san looked on in tears, while Maki stood frozen as the cold realization dawned that she too was about to be cut loose. Jimmy-sensei is on the floor, clutching his head after being splashed with liquid. As he takes the chemical splash directly to his head, Maki Oda looks on in horror. Meanwhile, he desperately clutches his face as the liquid drips down. Seeing this, Momo cries out in sheer panic, calling for him. In the aftermath, Maki Oda screams his name, while Momo defensively shouts that it was Maki's own fault. Still trembling in disbelief, Maki Oda can only stare at the teacher. But instead of showing anger, Jim Sets calmly addresses her, warning that getting chemicals in the eyes is extremely dangerous. Confused by his calm demeanor, Maki Oda frantically asks why he is unharmed, but he reminds her that he already told her this was pointless. He then asks her if she even bothered to read the label on the bottle. When she stammers about it being hydrochloric acid, he explains that it is actually highly diluted acid meant for basic experiments. Because of that low concentration, he adds that it is completely incapable of causing serious harm to anyone. Even so, he notes that while it is still a chemical that should be washed off immediately, it is not lethal. As he washes his head at the sink, he explains the risk of skin irritation while she stands frozen, wondering how this could be. Realizing that something is terribly wrong with her plan, she is left in shock. She mutters about Tsubaki and the others setting her up, but he firmly calls her name to get her attention. Turning back to her, Jimmy-sensei asks if she is finally ready to face her true honest self. Stunned by the question, she stares blankly, completely overwhelmed by his words. He points out that her ignorance kept her from realizing the truth about the bottle, adding that her chemistry grades and all her other subjects are terrible. Furthermore, he reveals that because she failed to submit her notebook and skipped the makeup exam, her academic standing has plummeted to the very bottom of the grade. He warns her that she will repeat the school year if she does not start trying, prompting Momo to gasp in surprise, believing her rival's grades were much higher. However, he flatly dismisses the idea, stating that such a claim is completely impossible. He explains that her actual grades were barely any different from Momo's, leaving Momo utterly confused since she had claimed otherwise. Looking away solemnly, he hints at a deeper truth behind her deception. Mari then speaks up to Tenjiku-sensei, mentioning that she has seen the cakes from this cafe before. Looking closely at her phone screen, she confirms the familiar designs. She points out that Maki had claimed to have made those exact same cakes herself, leaving her classmate completely speechless. Jimmy-sensei then flatly concludes that this means Maki has been lying all along. As a result, Maki stands frozen in complete shock as her deception is laid bare. While Maki stammers in disbelief, Jimmy-sensei explains that although he cannot prove who leaked the photos, he has uncovered other truths. He points out that the handwriting on the blackboard matches Maki's, and that she clearly exaggerated the rumors to put Momo at a disadvantage. Another classmate chimed in, noting that Maki always tried to compete with Momo by boasting, but her grand stories never had any substance. Jimmy-sensei continues, preparing to deliver the final blow to her fabricated reputation. The classmate adds that since Maki could not even submit her entertainment activities application, her modeling career was likely entirely fictional. Another student agrees, noting that despite Maki's claims of working and having connections, no industry insiders had ever heard of her. Hearing this, Momo looks on in disbelief, wondering why her former friend would go to such extreme lengths. A male classmate remarks that maintaining such a massive lie was bound to get exposed eventually. He gently points out that in the end, Maki is only bringing embarrassment upon herself. Maki looks down in utter shame as the harsh reality of her exposed lies sinks in. Jimmy-sensei then asks her if she lied just to feel like she had finally overtaken Momo. He warns her that while lying might bring temporary satisfaction, it will only lead to her self-destruction. Finally, Jimmy-sensei advises Maki that what she truly needs is not a world of lies to fit in but genuine personal growth. He explains that true strength is not about running from reality with temporary lies, but about facing it. With that, he reaches down and places his hand on the bottle of hydrochloric acid. He adds that fortunately, he has absolutely no interest in her private life. He adds that whatever she might have done outside of school is completely irrelevant to him. Addressing her directly, the teacher calls out to Maki Oda. He suggests that while she must apologize for this incident, she should properly resubmit her chemistry notebook and take the makeup exam again. Although the rules might dictate that she should give up, he promises that if she is willing to work hard, he will support her as much as possible. With a gentle smile, Science encourages Maki Oda to give it her best effort. He explains that she should do this so that she will no longer rely on lies. Instead, he wants her to become someone who is truly valued for who she is, leaving Maki Oda staring at him in stunned silence. Seeing this, Momo chimes in supportively, agreeing that although Maki Oda messed up badly this time, life is still very long. She points out that since she was able to reflect on her own mistakes, Maki Oda can do the same. She enthusiastically reassures her that Maki Oda is fully capable of changing for the better. She adds that there is absolutely no need for Maki Oda to force herself to fit in with Tsubaki and her group, prompting Maki Oda to quietly comment on how positive she is. Looking down with a soft smile, Maki Oda remarks that Momo really is incredibly optimistic. But then, Maki Oda leans in close and whispers with a chilling smile that she finds that exact trait incredibly annoying and absolutely hates her. Turning back to the teacher, she mockingly questions his offer to help, demanding to know what he could possibly do to make her life happy. She angrily warns them not to look down on her just because they caught her in a lie, asserting that she only cares about her own satisfaction and will always hate Momo. Glaring at her classmate, she declares that she absolutely cannot tolerate seeing Momo walk down a blessed and happy path. She rants that she could never defeat Momo in anything other than academics because they were born different, concluding that staying with Tsubaki's group is her only chance to make her life shine. She then confronts Jimmy-sensei, asserting that while she might be foolish, she is not completely stupid. Glaring at him, she declares that just looking at him makes her skin crawl. She claims his fake shady smile might fool Momo and the others, but she will never be deceived. Closing in on him, she aggressively told him that he was exactly the same as her. She accused him of not actually understanding or caring about his students at all. She claimed he only put on that act because it made him popular. She yelled that no matter how much he tried to fake it, he would never become a good teacher. The school bell rang as they stood in the hallway, with Momo watching them from behind. Maki started to say something else to him, her expression tense. Momo looked on in surprise and worry, unsure of what would happen next. Jimmy-sensei calmly addressed her by her full name and attendance number, Maki Oda. He bluntly told her that she really was an idiot after all. He looked down at her with a cold, completely expressionless gaze. Meanwhile, Nagisa was shocked to hear that they were completely cutting Maki off. She argued that the chemicals were only meant for a harmless prank, but Tsubaki coldly dismissed her sudden hesitation. Nagisa pointed out that Tsubaki had also been laughing at Maki behind her back. Tsubaki reminded her of how they all agreed Maki was a fool who would tell any lie just to make herself look good. Sitting on the bench, Tsubaki admitted that she absolutely detested Momo for betraying them. However, she made it clear that she despised liars even more. They mocked Maki for sneaking around behind their backs. Glad that the incriminating photo had come into their hands at the perfect moment, Tsubaki concluded that it felt like their cleanup was finally complete. Maki could only watch in despair, calling out Tsubaki's name in a trembling voice. The papers scattered and flew away in the wind as the girls began to walk away. Tsubaki turned back to add that she had been quite surprised by what she saw. Maki and Nagisa stared back at her in silence. Tsubaki remarked that there were others who needed cleaning up more than Maki, prompting Jimmy-sensei to apologize for letting his true feelings slip out now that the bell had rung. He stood quietly in the school hallway facing Maki. When Maki wondered about making her life shine, Jimmy-sensei bluntly told her that it would be impossible for someone who couldn't even grasp her own current position. He advised her to follow Momo's example if she didn't want to lose everything, urging her to quietly take the makeup exam next week. He warned her that otherwise her school life would truly be over. Maki began to stammer in shock. She reached out to grab his sleeve, desperately calling out to him. Startled, Maki pulled back and told him not to touch her. Jimmy-sensei calmly explained that his overtime hours had reached their limit, so he could no longer deal with her, noting that he would only offer guidance if it were strictly within his duties as a teacher. He left her with a cold reminder of his strict professional boundaries. But as documents investigating Jimmy-sensei's past scattered around, a voice chillingly declared that the teacher was nothing but a massive liar. Maki Oda lies in her room, feeling completely drained and sluggish. She laments that she has slept so much lately that she cannot sleep anymore. She tries to count how many days she has skipped school, wondering if it has been 1 or 2 weeks. Meanwhile, a massive Ferris wheel stands tall at an amusement park. Standing near the entrance is Mari-san, wearing cat ears and looking incredibly solemn. Momo immediately complains about Mari-san's gloomy expression and how she was made to run errands. She reminds Mari-san that she went out of her way to hang out because Mari-san asked, boasting about her status as a cute celebrity. Momo then criticizes Mari-san's tacky fashion, mentioning she had to buy her a shirt while passing fans recognize Momo. After greeting her fans, Momo questions why Mari-san isn't wearing a heavy jacket in the summer heat. Momo silently wonders if Mari-san has ever been to an amusement park or if she simply has no friends. The two sit in silence on a bench under the trees. Annoyed by the quiet, Momo demands to know what is wrong with her. Mari-san hesitantly begins to explain her true reason for wanting to meet up. She reveals she wanted to talk about Jimmy-sensei, catching Momo completely off guard. Momo complains about discussing their teacher on her day off, but Mari-san points out Momo's lingering anger. Mari-san notes that Momo has been visibly angry at Jimmy-sensei for a while. She recalls the day they were supposed to celebrate when Momo arrived late looking absolutely furious. She adds that Jimmy-sensei had returned soaking wet and neither of them said a single word. Furthermore, Maki Oda never showed up to school again before the break started. Mari-san directly asks Momo if something happened between her and Jimmy-sensei. Momo looks away, her expression turning somber. She quietly claims that absolutely nothing happened between them. This response leaves Mari-san utterly confused. Momo bitterly explains that she is furious precisely because nothing happened between them. Meanwhile, in the staff room, Sakede-sensei wonders if a simple suspension was really the only punishment Maki received for the chemical incident. A colleague points out that her actions technically amounted to theft and attempted injury, expressing surprise at such a light penalty given how furious her parents were about the online drama. Jimmy-sensei clarifies that because no official damage report was filed, the school administration preferred to handle the matter quietly. He starts to say something else, recalling a past conversation about Tsubaki Yabu, but stops himself when asked to elaborate. Jimmy-sensei quickly dismisses it, claiming it is nothing. Meanwhile, Tenjiku-sensei approaches Jimmy-sensei to ask if he is doing all right. After a sudden noise, she mentions a rumor that Maki Oda has completely lost contact with everyone in Class A. She adds that even her usual group has abandoned her, as classmates now openly gossip about Maki being a liar who lost everything. Tenjiku-sensei expresses a bad feeling about the situation, noting how harsh the student's gossip has become. When asked about the situation, Jimmy-sensei responds with indifference, prompting an annoyed Tenjiku-sensei to question his lack of concern for his own student. When he remains unbothered, she asks if he is trying to pick a fight with her. She lectures him on the need to understand the root of Maki's complex and help her, but Jimmy-sensei cuts her off. He firmly reminds her of his previous warning to refrain from such unwanted meddling. Annoyed by her persistent questioning, Jimmy-sensei bluntly states that she is not the homeroom teacher of Class A. He emphasizes that the responsibility belongs solely to him. Angered by his cold attitude, Tenjiku-sensei storms out of the room and slams the door behind her. She fumes over his behavior to a colleague, who notes that this is just his usual demeanor while questioning his warm attire in the summer. The colleague advises Tenjiku-sensei not to waste her energy dealing with someone like him. While acknowledging Jimmy-sensei's extreme coldness, the colleague admits to understanding his perspective to some extent. Back in the office, Sakati-sensei admits he does not dislike Jimmy-sensei's clear boundaries, finding it a miracle he has managed to remain Class A's homeroom teacher. He reasons that doing their job moderately and achieving decent results is perfectly sufficient. He adds that teachers barely get a real summer vacation anyway. Meanwhile, Mari-san lies on the floor of her messy room, staring blankly at the ceiling. At the same time, Momo Hananaka recalls the shocking accusation of Jimmy-sensei being a massive liar. She remembers the moment he turned his back on them in the school hallway. In her memory, Maki Oda had asked him if he truly had no intention of helping students outside of his official duties, to which he calmly agreed. Jimmy-sensei had flatly confirmed that was indeed the case. Maki had then desperately asked him about his true feelings regarding Momo. Hananaka-san notes that while she can understand wanting to push Maki away due to her lack of charm, there was more to his actions. She points out that when it came to her, however, his attitude was entirely different. After all, he had actually stepped in to save her. She argues that even if it was just his job, nobody would normally go that far, but she is suddenly interrupted by Jimmy-sensei calling her name. Jimmy-sensei coldly cuts her off, asking if he can go home if they are just going to gossip, noting that his working hours are long over and he values his private life. A close-up reveals the shocked, wide-eyed expression of Hananaka-san, stunned by his blunt dismissal. Meanwhile, Maki stands in the hallway, looking down in somber silence as the tension lingers. Maki quietly mutters that she wishes he really would just leave. Turning to her classmate, Maki reminds her of her earlier words about not needing a world built on lies. Maki then turns her anger toward Jimmy-sensei, screaming that he should just quit being a teacher right now if that is how he feels. She desperately demands to know why he ever decided to become a teacher in the first place. Jimmy-sensei looks down at Maki in silence as she awaits his response. He slightly parts his lips, preparing to say something to her. He adjusts his glasses with a quiet, solemn expression. Maki's eye widens in sheer shock at whatever he quietly whispered to her. A mysterious voice echoes, suggesting that she, being the same as him, should understand his reasons best of all. Maki lies on her back on the floor of her messy room, staring blankly upward in deep contemplation. She remains completely motionless on the floor, surrounded by scattered books and clutter. As questions linger about his mysterious past, Jimmy-sensei gazes out the window, muttering that summer is his least favorite season. The next day, a student is shocked to learn from Ishitaka-sensei that Jimmy-sensei has suddenly taken 5 days of paid leave for summer vacation. A female teacher addresses the first-year students of Kyono Academy, announcing the start of their 3-day summer camp. She explains that while participation is voluntary, they have a remarkably high turnout this year. As she praises their academic enthusiasm, she is suddenly interrupted by a loud shout from the crowd. The twin-tailed girl, Hwa Jong-san, stands up to complain that their Class 1 homeroom teacher has not even arrived yet. She expresses her utter disbelief that a teacher would skip out on the very first day of camp. Her classmate Tsubaki Yabu tries to calm her down by suggesting he might be sick, but the angry girl refuses to accept any excuses. She argues that since the students paid money to study, it is the teacher's duty to be there and support them. Tsubaki Yabu stares at her in mild surprise at her intense reaction. When asked why she is so desperate, the twin-tailed girl insists she has every reason to be worked up. She reveals she wants to audition for a quiz show next year, and needs Gma to teach her so she does not look foolish. Though Tsubaki Yabu silently notes her ignorance is already obvious. Furious, she screams insults at the absences in, calling him a useless four-eyed virgin. Nearby, the other teachers observe her wild outburst, whispering that her terrible attitude is an embarrassment to the school. They discuss how difficult high school girls are to handle, though one notes that the eccentric one's even more troublesome for actually taking a day off. Meanwhile, another teacher praises Saki's class for being full of well-behaved students with the highest participation rate. She envies how his students even volunteer to help clean up after meals. The other teachers complain about being disrespected by their own classes and beg Sakati for his secret. He looks back at them with a quiet, unreadable expression. With a cheerful smile, Sakati simply tells them that his methods are a secret. During dinner, a classmate asks Vali-san if she wants to head to the large communal bath once they finish eating. The quiet girl looks down silently, hesitant to join the others. She quietly explains she prefers to bathe alone at the very end, while Hwajung-san cheerfully announces she is heading in first to enjoy a long beauty bath. The classmate watches her leave, slightly taken aback by her sudden departure. Turning back to Vonley-san, the classmate bluntly criticizes her outfit, calling it completely unstylish and out of season. Annoyed by the unsolicited fashion advice, the dark-haired girl tells her to just go already, prompting a sarcastic reply as the classmate walks away. Left alone, she stares down at her tray in silence. She quietly contemplates her food, lost in her own thoughts. Looking at her meal, Vonley-san reflects on the camp, realizing that her past self would have never chosen to attend. Back in her room, a travel bag rests quietly on the bed. Standing there, Vonley-san looks down at the open luggage. She pulls out a short-sleeved t-shirt to examine it closely. As she holds the shirt, she recalls an image of the stylish and cheerful Hananaka Momo. Looking down, Vonley-san sighs to herself, believing there is no way she could ever pull off wearing an outfit like that. She then steps out of her slippers and stands barefoot on the floor. Looking down at her bare arms, she stares at the numerous self-harm scars lining her wrists. Wally-san is relieved that she has no lasting numbness in her hands, but she laments that the prominent scars still remain. She anxiously wonders if Jimmy-sensei would despise a girl with a troubled past like hers. She sadly contemplates whether he would prefer someone glamorous and cute like Hananaka Momo instead. She stands alone in the middle of her room, overwhelmed by her thoughts. Staring at the light fixture, she despairs at the thought of becoming just like the deceitful Maki Oda. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a peaceful indoor hot spring bath. As Maki Oda sneezes elsewhere, a somber thought is about how futile it is to believe in or care for someone. Soaking in the hot water, Hananaka Momo bitterly reflects that a teacher is ultimately just a teacher. She sits quietly in the bath, accepting the cold reality of their strictly professional relationship. Momo reasons that she never expected him to watch over her constantly or work himself to exhaustion. However, she recalls Jimmy-sensei's promise to always support her as long as she remained his student. She wistfully wishes that those comforting words had actually been genuine. Even if it was just part of his job, she finds it incredibly painful to accept that everything he said was a lie. Momo bitterly concludes that his empty promises make him a massive liar, far more hollow than Maki Oda. Elsewhere, Maki sneezes again and wonders if someone is gossiping about her. Momo continues to soak in the quiet bath, lost in her resentment. Outside, the evening sky settles over the peaceful hot spring inn. Near the entrance, as Jimmy-sensei walks through the gate, Tsubaki Yabu calls out to him with a cheerful expression. She playfully remarks that he is arriving quite late, comparing him to a high-ranking executive. Stopping in his tracks, he addresses her formally by her attendance number and name. He reminds her that students are forbidden from going out after 8 in the evening during the camp, but she dismisses his strictness and requests a private chat. She tells him not to be on guard, assuring him that she would never resort to a cheap honey trap like Hananaka-san did. She mockingly adds that such desperate tricks are only for foolish girls who have nothing going for them but their gender. She boasts that if she truly wanted to, she could easily have him fired without resorting to such roundabout methods. However, she notes that simply getting him fired would not be satisfying enough. She explains that, just like his predecessors, he must be driven to resign on his own out of sheer regret and humiliation. Faced with her grand threats, Jimmy-sensei merely lets out a heavy, unbothered sigh. He flatly acknowledges her words with a calm, unimpressed expression. He then bluntly tells her that her request is completely impossible. She mockingly praises his stubbornness, remarking that teachers who cling to their jobs despite misfortune certainly have a different kind of grit. She watches him walk away with a cheerful yet deeply unsettling smile. Her smile turns chilling as she suddenly calls him a murderer. Jimmy-sensei stops in his tracks, looking back at her with a serious expression. She remarks how unfortunate it would be if this secret got out, just as he was finally fitting in at the school. She begins to reveal the dark secret from his past. She explicitly accuses him of driving a student in his previous class to commit suicide. She muses that even the bold Hananaka-san would be completely repulsed by such a revelation. She then casually changes the subject to mock his age, prompting Jimmy-sensei to finally speak her name. He notes that she is being unusually talkative today. She stares back at him with a cold, silent expression. He explains that he must get to work in 10 minutes due to a special schedule, urging her to return to her room. As they walk away, he suddenly stops in his tracks. Turning back toward her, he mentions that there is one more thing he needs to address. He firmly states that whatever she thinks she knows about him, he had nothing to do with the incident from 10 years ago. Against a dark, splattered background, he chillingly adds that the other person simply died on their own. The dark ink splatters loom heavily, reflecting the grim nature of his words. The scene shifts back to the quiet, empty school interior. Jimmy-sensei walks into a study area and spots someone sitting at a desk. He calls out to Momo Hananaka, who reacts with an immediate disappointed groan. He stares down at her with a flat, unimpressed look. When he questions her rude reaction, she quickly dismisses it as nothing. She slumps back down onto her desk, looking thoroughly exhausted. He notices her appearance and asks what happened to her clothes. She casually explains that it is just the usual bullying, nothing different from before. She admits she let her guard down because her modeling comeback was going so well, though she is glad they at least stopped calling her ugly. He responds with a completely flat, uninterested remark. Annoyed by his coldness, she complains that he should coolly offer her his jacket, but he dryly questions if that is actually a teacher's job. He explains that he dislikes taking off his jacket, but she reminds him that he did so when lecturing Maki. He defends himself, noting that it was because he had been splashed with diluted hydrochloric acid. Frustrated by his excuses, she snaps that this attitude is exactly why he is still a virgin, though he calmly maintains that it is entirely by his own choice. The two of them stand there panting, catching their breath after their heated exchange. Breaking the silence, Jimmy mentions that since he has just arrived, he fortunately has a spare jacket ready to put on. He quietly slips into the spare jacket to cover himself up. Once again fully dressed, he stands before her looking as plain and professional as ever. Seeing her intense expression, Jimmy calls out to Hananaka-san, starting to ask what is wrong. She cuts him off, stating that because he is currently acting as a teacher, his actions are bound by that role. Looking at him with deep vulnerability, she asks if that professional duty is the only reason he is being so kind to Momo. As she steps forward, her inner thoughts lament, that no matter how much she believes or yearns for him, the distance remains. She closes the distance between them, her long hair swaying as she moves resolutely toward him. Meanwhile, Mari-san stands frozen in the doorway, clutching her papers as she witnesses the tense scene unfolding. Knowing deep down that he is a massive liar, Momo suddenly pulls him into a sudden passionate kiss. His eyes widen in utter shock as she presses her lips against his. From the doorway, Mari-san watches the intimate moment unfold in stunned silence. As her slipper slips off her foot from the force of her embrace, Momo wonders why she has become so desperately infatuated with him. Hananaka stands close to Jimmy-sensei, unaware that Mari-san is watching them from the shadows. Mari-san's eyes widen in absolute shock at the sight. Meanwhile, Hananaka leans in so close to Jimmy-sensei that their lips almost touch. The two of them stand frozen in the quiet room, inches apart. Suddenly, Hananaka pulls back and bursts into playful laughter. Jimmy-sensei stands completely stunned as she smiles brightly at him. Momo playfully asks if she managed to surprise him. She quickly warns him not to get the wrong idea about her intentions. She mockingly asks if he really thought a super cute girl like her would seriously kiss a four-eyed virgin. Satisfied with his stunned reaction, Momo lets out a pleased sigh. She points out that even a massive liar like him can make such a flustered face. Although she still finds him uncool and gross, she admits she doesn't hate him because he is reliable. She decides to put Maki, Tsubaki, and Nagisa aside for a moment. She confesses that she does not really understand Erika or the other girls either. However, she wonders about students like Mari-san. Momo advises him that even if he is a terrible teacher, he must cherish the students who believe in him. When he remains completely silent, she looks at him with concern and calls his name. She teases him, asking if he is shocked that she did not kiss him, or if her calling him gross hurt his feelings. Sighing, she offers to let him kiss her cheek as thanks for lending her his jacket. But Jimmy-sensei suddenly recoils, leaving her utterly confused. He clutches his face, looking deeply troubled and overwhelmed. Without a word, he suddenly bolts out of the room, prompting her to yell after him in confusion. She is left standing alone, completely stunned by his abrupt escape. Peeking into the men's restroom, she is shocked to find him hunched over a sink. Meanwhile, he is startled by her sudden intrusion. Akashi then rushes in, frantically asking if Jimmy-sensei took time off due to poor health. Realizing she is in the men's restroom, Hananaka Momo panics while Jimmy-sensei asks what happened. Blushing furiously, she tries to explain her attempt to kiss him, leaving her colleagues utterly confused. Overwhelmed by embarrassment, Hananaka Momo bursts into tears. She runs away crying, leaving the male teachers completely bewildered. Screaming her hatred for the virgin teacher, she flees as the others wonder what is wrong with her. Akashi then turns back to check if Jimmy-sensei is actually alright. Jimmy-sensei looks down, pale and clearly exhausted. He flatly insists that he is perfectly fine. Akashi warns him not to pass any illness to the students, but he repeats his denial. Sakade-sensei wishes he had spoken up sooner, but Jimmy-sensei stubbornly maintains he is fine. Jimmy-sensei coldly notes that he prepared all materials beforehand and asks if there is anything else. Sakita-sensei backs down, admitting everything is fine if he is truly alright. He quietly feels relieved that Jimmy-sensei is acting like his usual, slightly strange self. Saki-sensei watches silently as a student walks away down the corridor. He then turns his gaze back to Jimmy-sensei, who is walking away. Sakade-sensei calls out to Jimmy-sensei, who responds with his usual detached demeanor. Noting his poor condition, Sakade-sensei suggests they go cool off together. When Jimmy-sensei questions if this is official business, Sakade-sensei insists that it is. He explains he wants to discuss tomorrow's recreation, leaving Jimmy-sensei in silent contemplation. With a heavy sigh, Jimmy-sensei finally relents and agrees to talk. A lighter is flicked open, sparking a bright flame in the quiet space. Sakade-sensei lets out a soft sigh as he brings the flame to his cigarette. Turning to his colleague, he asks if it is surprising to see him smoking occasionally. He admits that because cigarettes are so expensive, he rarely indulges in them. He complains about the stress of working through holidays, expressing envy toward Jimmy-sensei for taking time off without causing friction. Sakade-sensei quickly clarifies that he is not mocking him but rather respects him, while Jimmy-sensei remains silent. He points out that Jimmy-sensei does not just know the names of the other faculty members. He highlights how Jimmy-sensei memorized every single student's name and profile from his very first day. He explains that Jimmy-sensei can identify anyone instantly, demonstrating this by greeting a passing student by name in class, leaving her startled. He adds that while people focus on Jimmy-sensei avoiding overtime, he always finishes his work and holds numerous qualifications. However, he pauses, hinting at a certain weakness. He remarks that Jimmy-sensei seems to be terrible at handling girls. Sakade-sensei confesses he caught the end of Jimmy-sensei's earlier encounter, teasing him about his unexpected charm. He comments that throwing up was quite harsh, acknowledging Hananaka's celebrity appeal but reminding him that they are teachers. He advises that teachers should not let students disrupt their peace, suggesting they treat them like cute pets and learn to manage them. He warns that failing to do so will only lead to getting hurt. Jimmy-sensei speaks up, quietly calling out to Sakade-sensei. Back inside, Erika Tsutsuji asks if they are going to discuss the recreation activities yet. Hananaka laments the humiliation, noting that she was so shocked she ended up hiding in the restroom. She stands in the hallway, looking dejected after her ordeal. Mari-san approaches her, noting that she is late. Hananaka makes excuses about being busy and asks Mari-san if she took a shower, but Mari-san presses her on what happened. Mari-san bluntly asks if her being busy involved trying to kiss Jimmy-sensei. A shocked Hananaka asks if she saw, and Mari-san confirms she saw everything, including the vomiting. Hananaka tries to defend herself by calling Jimmy-sensei awful and claiming her kiss was just a joke, but Mari-san coldly questions her excuse. Mari-san glares with a dark, intense expression that leaves Hananaka speechless. She accuses her of using the excuse of thanking their teacher for his jacket, just to try to kiss him. She points out that the jacket her classmate is currently currently wearing belongs to him. Hananaka is left speechless and visibly nervous by the sudden accusation. She stammers that it was just a cheek kiss and didn't even succeed, but Mari-san retorts that whether it succeeded or not is irrelevant. Mari-san continues, stating that if Hananaka Momo is wearing the jacket because of her feelings for the teacher, it simply makes her extremely uncomfortable, leaving Hananaka Momo wide-eyed in shock. Mari-san adds that she believed Hananaka Momo understood her feelings, while Hananaka Momo remains silent. Hananaka Momo hesitantly asks what she means by feelings. Mari-san looks down, asking if Hananaka Momo is joking. Hananaka Momo asks if she is serious, prompting Mari-san to ask if she could actually like that incredibly uncool, creepy virgin glasses guy. Meanwhile, Nagisa Okina looks thoroughly annoyed as she travels. She sighs about being extremely late for the summer camp, worrying that Tsubaki will be in a terrible mood. Erika Tsutsuji reassures her, saying it couldn't be helped since she had family matters and Nagisa had a club match. Nagisa agrees but still feels uneasy about the situation. She can't help but think of Jimmy-sensei's face. Nagisa complains about the pointlessness of attending the camp, noting that Erika and Tsubaki are already top students while she hates studying, and laments having to spend her summer vacation looking at that glasses guy's face. She says she feels like throwing up, but Erika suddenly calls out to her to look outside. Erika points out how beautiful the night view is, while Nagisa looks on silently. Erika marvels at the stunning view, and Nagisa flatly remarks that it's because they are at a high altitude. Looking out at the isolated mountains, she notes that there is nothing but trees and a single hotel shop around. She grimly remarks that if someone were to die out here, nobody would ever find out. Although Erika finds the thought terrifying, she counters that it is still far less scary than Tsubaki. Suddenly the door burst open as Mari-san violently tackled Momo into the room, shocking the onlookers. Mari-san aggressively threatened to strip the jacket off Momo herself if she refused to cooperate. She demanded Momo hand over the jacket immediately, but Momo fiercely shot back, telling her to stop being so jealous. Their struggle escalated as Mari-san slammed Momo hard against the wall. The sudden impact left both girls momentarily stunned and staring at each other in disbelief. Momo then shrieked in outrage that her beautiful model face had been touched, prompting Mari-san to call her a noisy narcissist. Hearing the endless screaming, Nagisa and Erika decided to walk away in sheer annoyance. Erika sighed, lamenting that she had bothered to warn them in the first place. Meanwhile, Mari-san glared with intense, unyielding fury. Out in the hallway, Sakide-sensei smugly boasted to Jimmy-sensei that he was far better at managing the female students. Tenjiku frantically calls for Zijin Senjin to stop Hajong-san and Vonley-san, who have suddenly started fighting. Later, Erika Tsutsuji and Sabaki discuss how unbelievable it is for high schoolers to get into a physical fistfight. A male colleague sighs and asks what happened next. He wonders why Zijin Senjin is the one who is completely beaten up instead of the two girls, while Tenjiku nervously tries to explain. Back in the room, Wanli-san criticizes Hwajong-san for throwing something at the teacher, but she claims her hand slipped because of a certain one-sided lover. When asked why she even has a stun gun, Hwajong-san argues that crime prevention is essential for someone as cute as her. She then mockingly asks Wanli-san if she is used to pain anyway. This provokes Wanli-san to call her ugly, leading to a childish argument about who has the uglier personality. A stern female teacher yells at Zijin Senjin, demanding his full attention. She strictly warns him that there is no leaving on time during this summer camp. She reminds him that even if it is just a kid's fight, he is the one who must take responsibility if anything goes wrong. Finally, she demands to know if he has properly understood the cause of the conflict. Zijin Senjin looks down with a dark, serious expression on his face. He quietly promises to take full responsibility and work to resolve the issue. Outside, other students are happily playing with a ball during their free time. Meanwhile, other girls are chatting and gossiping in a circle. Zijin Senjin observes the stark difference between Class A and Class E, comparing them to heaven and hell. In Class B, a girl bossily demands tea from her class who submissively complies. Tenjiku notes that Class B has its own set of problems, treating friends more like servants. Amari suggests it is still better than being completely ignored, while Akashi laments that his students told him to stay away. Meanwhile, Also Senshin is surrounded by adoring female students who happily call out his name. One of these girls, Nobuko Kase, excitedly presents a box of homemade cookies to him. She happily explains that she baked them specifically for him. He warmly thanks her and praises her baking skills, which delights her. Seeing this, the other female classmates complain that she is being unfair by hogging his attention. Soon, a crowd of girls surrounds Sakit-sensei, offering him snacks and asking to take photos together. Watching the lively scene from a distance, Hananaka Momo notes how incredibly popular he is. She reasons that it is completely natural for girls to fall for such a handsome teacher. However, she cannot help but compare his charming presence to someone else. In stark contrast to that popularity, Jimmy-sensei calls out to Hananaka Momo and Mari-san. The two girls turn their attention toward him with serious expressions. Sitting in his plain tracksuit, Jimmy-sensei asks them to clarify the reason behind their fight last night, while Hananaka Momo silently wonders what Mari-san even sees in such an uninspiring man. Mari-san looks down nervously, unable to find her words. Jimmy-sensei asks if Mari-san was jealous because he lent his jacket to Hananaka Momo, completely oblivious to the romantic feelings involved, which leaves Mari-san stuttering in embarrassment. Annoyed by the awkward tension, Hananaka Momo urges Mari-san to just speak her mind. She points out that Jimmy-sensei is far too dense to ever understand unless they spell it out clearly. Because of that, Hananaka Momo decides to take matters into her own hands and starts to reveal Mari-san's feelings directly to him. Suddenly, Sake-sensei steps in and feeds Hananaka Momo a cookie to cut her off. He quietly whispers to her that she should stop, explaining that a confession should come from the person themselves to avoid hurting Mari-san. He promises to distract Jimmy-sensei so that Hananaka Momo can focus on making up with Mari-san. With a friendly wave, he walks away to handle the situation. Hananaka Momo is left standing there in surprise, holding the cookie. As Sakede-sensei successfully Drami-sensei away under the guise of work, Hananaka Momo realizes what a genuinely good person he is. She finally understands why all the students are so eager to bake cookies for him. She then takes a bite of the heart-shaped cookie herself. After chewing on it thoughtfully, she comes up with an idea. Turning back to Mari-san, Hananaka Momo suddenly suggests that she should also bake some cookies for Jimmy-sensei, leaving Mari-san completely stunned. Wading-san encourages her to have more confidence, noting that Wanli-san is actually much better at cooking than she is. She then boasts that since she herself is incredibly cute, she does not even need to know how to cook, telling her to focus on self-improvement instead of being jealous. She leaves Wally-san to wonder if this is just her awkward way of making peace. Mari-san looks down at the half-eaten handmade cookie in her hand, wondering who made it. As Momo runs off, Mari-san is left standing alone with her thoughts. Sitting on a tree stump, Mari-san sighs that Hananaka-san is always so full of confidence, admitting to herself that she already knows her own shortcomings. She acknowledges how pathetic and useless she is, unaware that Amari-sensei is watching her from behind the trees. Mari-san remains seated alone in the forest, deeply depressed. Meanwhile, Sakite-sensei and Jimmy-sensei walk together near a park pavilion. Sakite-sensei suddenly asks Jimmy-sensei why he is still a virgin. When Jimmy-sensei asks if the question is work-related and Sakite-sensei admits it is not, Jimmy-sensei flatly refuses to answer. Sakite-sensei laughs, remarking that Jimmy-sensei is surprisingly hopeless when it comes to girls, leaving Jimmy-sensei utterly confused. Sakite-sensei explains that even if Jimmy-sensei does not get it, Mari-san is definitely in love with him as a man. Jimmy-sensei listens in silence, his expression turning serious as he processes this revelation. Sakade-sensei notes that Mari-san is incredibly pure compared to Hananaka-san, admitting he initially thought she just had a teacher dependency issue like before. However, it turns out that this incident has made everything perfectly clear. Sakade-sensei declares that Mari-san's jealousy is proof of her romantic feelings. Sakade-sensei's expression darkens as he admits that while he acted cool by telling Mari-san she should confess on her own, he had other intentions. He then throws the box of handmade heart-shaped cookies over the bridge railing. The heart-shaped cookies scatter and shatter on the ground below. In a past conversation, Z Senshin flatly stated that getting confessed to by a student would be nothing but an absolute nuisance. He had stared ahead blankly, his expression unreadable and cold. Ibul Senjin countered, arguing that there was honestly nothing wrong with being liked by the students. He explained that young male teachers are naturally popular at all girls' schools, so keeping responses ambiguous keeps their affection alive. He added that maintaining this vague hope makes it much easier to control the students. Sakade-sensei reasoned that people naturally put in their utmost effort for someone they want to be liked by. He compared the dynamic to hosts or cabaret club hosts, claiming the best approach is to let everyone misunderstand and hold on to their dreams. He smiled brightly, asserting that this is the secret to remaining a popular teacher forever. Warning his colleague that distance is everything, he cautioned that trying to make things clear like before would ruin everything, prompting Jimmy-sensei to call his name. Jimmy-sensei looked back with a chillingly dark expression, asking when he had ever said that he did not understand. Nearby students gossiped maliciously, asking if anyone had seen the pathetic look on Jimmy-sensei's face. They mocked his plain appearance and laughed about girls fighting over a creepy virgin teacher, noting how much Mari-san must actually like him. Nagisa listened to the harsh gossip with a troubled, silent expression. Sakide-sensei noted that speaking of the devil, they could see someone standing alone in the distance. Erika observed her coldly, pointing out that she seemed to be entirely on her own now. She remarked that despite how much they used to play pretend at being friends, everything had ultimately returned to the way it was before. Nagisa scoffed, questioning if this miserable outcome was the supposed result of Jimmy-sensei's guidance, calling him utterly incompetent. Erika defended the situation slightly by noting that Maki had at least stopped lying and grown, though Nagisa pointed out she lost her place to belong in the process. Sakade-sensei chimed in, admitting he at least respected her persistence in not quitting despite facing daily harassment. A close-up showed a pair of dark, intense eyes listening quietly to the conversation. Jimmy-sensei's past words echoed in her mind, coldly stating that the student had simply died on her own. The eyes widened slightly as the chilling memory of his words lingered. Nearby a voice softly objects, stating that something is wrong. Sabaki then argues that the only reason Zine Senjin hasn't resigned yet is because they haven't pushed him hard enough. Erika agrees, noting that their teacher is not easily shaken by ordinary means. Because of that, Tsubaki explains that any verbal attack or painful blow is completely meaningless to him. She concludes that he has absolutely nothing to fear, but suddenly senses something behind her. Meanwhile, footsteps rustle nearby as Mari-san walks along the path. Noticing the presence, Mari-san wonders who could be there. Suddenly a hand reaches out menacingly toward her from behind. Before she can react, Tsubaki violently shoves Mari-san off the cliff, sending her phone flying. Mari-san plummets helplessly down the steep rocky slope. She crashes violently through the thick branches of the trees below. Watching the fall, Tsubaki stands at the edge with a completely completely cold and indifferent expression. She smiles warmly, whispering Jimitaro-sensei's name to herself. As she declares that he is just like her, Nagisa calls out to her in sheer panic. Terrified, Nagisa demands to know what she thinks she is doing. She warns Tsubaki that Mari-san could have easily died from such a fall. Nagisa worries about getting caught, but Tsubaki dismisses it, noting Mari-san recently attempted suicide anyway. Holding Mari-san's phone, Tsubaki reasons that everyone will assume she acted out of despair after their fight. She then coldly presses the button to power off the device. Although Nagisa remains hesitant, Tsubaki assures her that everything will be fine. She chillingly points out that even if it is deemed an accident, she was not the one who pushed her. She then confronts a terrified girl sitting on the ground, noting that she does not know why she has been hiding there, but recognizes her as one of Eisho Senjin's Class E students. Trembling with fear, the student calls her a murderer, but Tsubaki simply looks back and coldly asks what she is talking about. Against the dark silhouette of the forest, she delivers a chilling warning, declaring that the one who will actually become a murderer is the student herself.